Welcome, everyone. Want to call the meeting to order as soon as Mr. Cup sits down. And we have a very extensive agenda. Do we not, Curator Bradley?
Yes, we do.
You're very impressed with the agenda, I understand.
Marathon meeting for us. Thank you.
And so we want to get started right now. The first item on our agenda is approval of the 2014 Executive Committee and Board Standing Committee appointments. Would anybody like to have any discussion about this? Seeing no discussion.
Second.
There's been a motion. There's been a second. Cindy, would you call the roll?
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good? Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Yes.
You have all votes in favor.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is we need a resolution to go in executive session for our board as a whole. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Cindy, please call the roll.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good? Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder? All votes in favor.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is our Finance Committee meeting. Curator Covington, I understand we need a resolution from your committee to go into executive session.
Yes,
Is that
Mr.
correct?
Chairman, please.
Would you ask for?
I would move that we go into executive session.
Second.
Please call the roll. Cindy? Finance Committee roll.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Good? Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Stewart is absent, so all votes in favor.
And finally, before we go into executive session, we will open the Compensation and Human Resources Committee meeting. And Chairman Phillips, I understand we need a motion to go into executive session from your committee as well, correct?
We do. So move.
Second.
Cindy, please call the roll.
Okay, Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Good? Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Aye.
All votes in favor.
Now we will adjourn or recess to go into executive session down the hall. Let's go back into public session. And we'll start off with the continuation of our Finance Committee. Chair Covington, please proceed.
Finance Committee has 5 actions to take up today, all related to tuition and fees. Interim Vice President Tom Richards will first provide some context to set the stage, and then we'll present recommendations on each of the 5 action items.
Okay, thank you. Just to talk briefly about logistically how we'll walk through this afternoon, because we've got a packed meeting, lots of good information to present. I'm going to provide an overview again, just to kind of set the stage, to touch base on where we left off last November when we met. And then we're going to lead into several action items relating to resident undergraduate tuition, required fees, the housing and dining rates, and then we'll get into the discussion on supplemental fees, and we'll have the campuses, 3 of the campuses that have fees to propose will come up and be a part of that presentation. So the biggest thing in terms of starting out is just back to setting the stage and trying to provide some context from where we are in terms of our tuition, and mainly trying to highlight and look to the affordability issue for our students and families. We've looked at this before, and we looked at it specifically in November in terms of looking at 5-year increases in undergraduate resident tuition rates we're the lowest in the region. If we look at the contiguous states, and I apologize, there's a dark area that's making it hard to see some of the bars, but hopefully you can see it in your materials. The lowest 5-year annualized tuition increases in the contiguous states that surround us in terms of a competitive position and affordability. The slide that I have to share that's newer now that we didn't take a look at in November is not only are we lowest in the region, we're lowest in the nation. The College Board, in its annual survey of colleges, collects all kinds of data from public and private institutions across the country. This data in particular has been highlighted in some national news stories, and I'd heard even Governor Nixon refer to this in one of his speeches on higher ed. The state of Missouri is 50th out of all 50 states in terms of having the smallest 5-year increase in tuition and fees for its public higher ed institutions. Obviously, this applies across the state. We're the kind of the critical mass, though, in terms of moving those numbers. So again, lowest in the region, but also lowest in the nation in terms of keeping college tuition affordable, and 50th out of 50 in terms of all the states. Looking at it a different way, so not just sort of relative increases, but where are we on absolute terms relative to peers? This slide, 1-6, is just taking a look at each of the campuses' tuition and required fees and comparing against public doctoral national averages. So we're below average on an absolute basis, about 3.4% below the average that we have shown there. So relative increases, lowest in the nation, below average in terms of absolute tuition. The next slide, I just wanted to highlight again, we talked about this at the November meeting, and I know Curator Downing liked this slide and the information it presented. I would tell you I used the same slide earlier today in testifying before the Budget Committee for Higher Ed in the House, because it does tell several things on the same slide. The consistent story across higher ed of diminishing state appropriations being replaced by increases in tuition and fees. That's national story, that's not new. In terms of our case and our state specifically, is just a reminder, the level of those bars going across the graph, you'll notice that FY 2013 is about the same level as what we saw in FY 2001. So in terms of the revenue that we get, again, total revenue between tuition and state appropriations per FTE student, it's basically about the same today as it was in 2001. The green line, as a reminder, is simply taking where we were in 2001 and increasing that funding amount by inflation each year. So if our revenue stream per student had simply increased by the inflation rate, you can see sort of the gap at the right-hand side. It's a 30% funding gap, and that equates to $275 million in revenue. So the question is always, well, how did you close the gap? We've become very good at managing our costs, and we've been doing it for over a decade in terms of trying to become more efficient in how we spend our dollars. And I think we've done a good job. There's more work to be done, and we're looking forward to the challenge on that, but that's been a big piece of it. The other component, of course, has been the enrollment growth that we've experienced over this time, which is generally a good thing, but it is somewhat mixed in that we've added students perhaps without being able to invest as we'd like to along the way in faculty and other support systems. So we've seen student-faculty ratios rise, concerns with tenure-track faculty, et cetera. So it comes at a sort of a mixed cost. At the margin, it's delivered incremental revenue, but we haven't necessarily been able to make the investments that we'd like to along the way. The final way that we've made up for the gap is by deferring probably a lot of capital maintenance and repair needs. And we're going to talk about that in more detail at the Finance Committee meeting on Friday. But that's definitely been a bad thing. But it's a choice that we were forced to make, in essence, between students and faculty and buildings. And so I'd certainly argue that we did the right thing when we had to, but it's an issue that needs to be addressed because that problem will become worse and it will become more difficult to dig out of that hole.
Tom, how many students did we add from 01 to 13?
In terms of FTE students, about, from my memory, about 53,000 in FY 2013, and I know in terms of growth, the number that we talk about is somewhere around 19,000 students growth roughly over that time period.
Tom, again, I like this chart the last time you used it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it. So would it be fair to say from this chart that it looks like it's costing us on a per FTE student basis about $5,000 less to educate each student that comes through the door than it did back in 2001 on a inflation-adjusted basis?
We're doing it with less resources, yes. New chart I want to touch on as well. Some of you may have been aware of some articles that have appeared in the Wall Street Journal on higher education. One of them in particular was highlighting what they referred to as kind of the growth of administrative bloat within higher ed. Some of the institutions that were talked about in that article were UC Berkeley, University of Kansas, and University of Michigan. We just wanted to show this as a snapshot of how we compare against those institutions as well as the peer group overall. This chart is showing the total support or administrative expenses as a percentage of our total expenses overall. It's actually an inverse of one of our performance funding metrics. It's just looking at the math the other way. This is kind of a simpler view. This gives some perspective, though, in terms of how we compare to the peers mentioned in the article. But I'd actually just highlight on the median, if our spending, if our percentage of overhead as a percent of total revenues were just at the median, we would be spending another $37 million a year on administrative costs. So again, it's just kind of continuing the theme. We've been challenged to do kind of more with less, educating more students with actually less revenues, less support, and we've closed the gap by managing our costs. This is just another way to look at that in terms of illustrating the results of that.
Tom, what's the definition of administrative costs? Is that
The definition that's used in this is coming from IPED's data, which is the National Clearinghouse, and it's academic plus student services plus administrative support as a percentage of total, basically total E&G expenses. It's our performance funding metric. It's just that we're looking at it the inverse of the math.
But repeat that again, please.
Academic plus student services plus administrative support.
So is this the administrative support?
Yes. So if you will, overhead, if you will. And so if our level was at the median of the peer group nationally, that would suggest that we'd be spending $37 million more a year.
So faculty and staff salaries that are directly related to teaching would not be part of this, but other
Yep.
general administrative positions would be.
Not student services. Is that right? This does not include student services.
To the extent it was administrative support, we can get you the exact definition. I mean, there's a very specific, precise data definition. But we wanted to use the same thing that had been highlighted in this article that had gone around and kind of received national attention. And the other thing, we were highlighting these schools just because of the article, but if you look at the actual data, we're nearly at the bottom of the entire peer group. And so that would be some good data to bring back. As an aside, we do have a plan to come back to the board at the April meeting and delve more deeply into these topics in terms of efficiencies and effectiveness. So this is something that we'd certainly look at and get into more detail. But I did want to share it now because it does present, again, part of the setting the stage in terms of being efficient with resources, keeping tuition increases lowest in the nation. So in terms of then thinking about some of our cost drivers and where this money goes, just wanted to highlight a couple of things that, again, we've talked about previously, but just looking at the operations budget of the university, so, we're excluding the health system, we're excluding the auxiliaries, and just looking at the educational component. If salaries and wages go up by 1%, that cost is $7.8 million, just kind of working through the math. If our benefit flat rate goes up by 1%, and by the way, we're recommending that it will go up by 1% this coming year due to rising benefits costs, that's $5.4 million. So just in terms of basic expenses, and specifically the benefit flat rate is a required cost that's passed on across the board, meaning just in the educational areas of the university, $5.4 million will have to come from somewhere else to cover the increase in cost. The other part in the operations budget is really just this need for the continued investment in maintenance and repair of facilities. So this is kind of just the ordinary keeping the doors open, blocking and tackling components. More important, though, is to focus on the strategic plan and the funding requirements for all the initiatives for each of the 4 campuses. If we take a look at all their strategic plans and look at their specific action items that they're working on for FY14, and this is all in flux because everyone is still building their budgets, but across the 4 campuses, an investment of about $90 million will be needed to enact the strategic initiatives in this coming year. And it's really important to point out where the source of that funding is coming from. It's not coming, primarily, as you'll see, it's not coming from increases in tuition. It's not coming predominantly from the state. 55% of that, call it just half at least, is coming from the reallocation of existing resources. So again, the common theme of strategically deciding where we can pull money from areas that maybe are still important, but on a relative basis, less important than the strategic initiatives that have been identified by each of the 4 campuses. So 55% from that, and the campuses will highlight that on a campus level as well when they speak about their supplemental fees that they're asking for. In terms of just providing some context in advance, again, for the tuition fee increases, the $13 million that's shown, less than half of that would be derived from increases in the supplemental fees. So this just gives some perspective, but the main message is the bulk of the funding for the strategic plan initiatives are really somewhat painful cuts and reallocations from different areas within the university, focus more towards our strategy. Just to kind of lay the groundwork and just to go over some math, you're all aware that the governor had challenged the public institutions to hold tuition flat for Missouri resident students in exchange for a recommended budget increase of 5% in the core. There are all kinds of reasons to consider this. Just in terms of looking at the math, though, so this is just kind of putting forward numbers. We had to think about what would a baseline be and how would we think about this just in terms of numbers. Well, I think the most reasonable baseline to consider would be that state appropriations and resident undergraduate tuition would simply increase both at the rate of inflation, CPI, which is 1.5%. So if that were to happen, we would generate in that baseline scenario $9.7 million in additional revenues. The governor's recommendation, though, should the legislature act on that, would bring us additional revenues from the state of $20.7 million. So if you're comparing the governor's recommendation, assuming the legislature supports it, to a baseline CPI increase, there's potential incremental revenue of $11 million.
Tom, have you included the 2% for STEM and the mental health piece into
No.
that?
This is just looking at the core, and part of the reason is to be conservative, and that seems to be the most likely thing that would get through, but it does not include the additional revenues.
How much more additional revenue would we anticipate from 2% for STEM and the mental health piece?
I think the amount for us for STEM was in the neighborhood of $12 million.
It's 3% is what the governor has proposed. So it's 3% for $12 million would be.
And then
And
mental health?
the mental health initiative, if someone can,
12 million out of a $20 million recommendation would go to the University of Missouri system.
So total, we would anticipate 20.7 plus 12 and 12,
whatever else,
plus
to
24.
the extent the legislature approved that.
Right, it's all dependent
Yeah.
on the
Yep.
legislature.
And then those would be more targeted dollars where, of course, this is just our core, just general support. But so in the most conservative way to look at this, it's incremental revenue of $11 million.
And so the extra $11 million goes into our strategic priorities? Is that what that's going to happen to that?
The process that we used last year in allocating incremental dollars, which is if the governor's recommendation of 5% approved, which is the 20.7, it would be 20.7 reallocated based on the competitiveness of the applications by the campus and the system.
So that gets us to our first point of discussion and action item. The proposal is to maintain resident undergraduate tuition rates at current levels, current FY14 levels going into FY15. And this would also apply to the metropolitan undergraduate rates that are in effect at UMKC in particular.
What about non-resident rates?
We're going to get to that in a subsequent action item.
Are there any questions for Tom with respect to this action item number 1? Take a vote of the Finance Committee. If there is a motion within the committee, please, to approve this recommendation.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion?
Curator Covington?
Yes?
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Stewart is absent. You have all votes of the committee in favor.
Thank you. And from the committee, is there a motion to the board as a whole that we recommend the schedule of rates as provided in these materials?
This is undergraduate tuition.
Yes, the same, just recommending to, yes. In this action item 1. And there's a motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes?
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
And Curator Ponder.
Yes.
All votes in favor.
And Chairman Downing, I apologize for taking over the roll call for the whole board. That
No,
was
that's
your
okay.
job.
Hey, realize this is your first meeting as chair of the Finance Committee, and I, of all people, understand how difficult your job is. But I think in the future, at least the way I did it, and I may have done it wrong, and maybe Mr. Hoskins can tell us, but when the committee voted, then I moved on behalf of the committee for the full board to vote in favor. Is that an appropriate way to do it, or do we?
It certainly has been the customary way, and that would be an appropriate way to do it.
Thank you.
But he calls for the motion.
But you call for the
He's
motion.
got to call for the motion.
Yeah, right. And that's what I preempted. I apologize. Tom,
Okay.
thank you.
The second action item that we'll get to are the activity, facility, and health service fees. The fees in this case for the undergraduates are proposed to increase at the rate of inflation or below, and those are all in compliance with Senate Bill 389. And then we have graduate and professional fees that are basically at the inflationary increase as well. You have in your materials the details of what's underlying this.
This is on, I have a question, but not on this one. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Are these all fees then?
Yeah, these would-
Are there any other fees we're voting on?
Oh, yes. This is just the activity, facility, and health service fees.
Okay, yeah, that's right. We got other fees,
So-
okay. Okay, gotcha.
Rec center fees, student activity fees, things like that.
Any question?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor?
You gotta call roll.
Cindy? Thank you.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Okay. All committee votes in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation of the committee is to adopt the student activity, facility, and health service fees.
Second? In support of the committee's motion?
Second.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
And Curator Ponder.
Yes.
All votes in favor.
So the next thing that we're going to cover are increases in housing and dining rates for this coming academic year. look at sort of what we refer to as a predominant plan, which is just sort of the most common combination that students would have. And then generally, these increases would apply across the board. MU, and we'll cover these in some detail. MU overall, 3.3% increase, UMKC 2%, Missouri S&T 3.1%, and St. Louis 1.5%. It's a combination, again, just to note that there are room and board fees, and they're really calculated separately. So the dining fees are calculated separately from the actual housing fees, but we blend them together to come up with a blended rate in terms of the impact on the student. I wanted to first highlight the fees at MU in terms of putting it in context of their residential life master plan. Again, this strategic plan that's been in place for MU probably more than a decade at this point has been a systematic, methodical reinvestment, renovation, replacement of the housing stock. And to drive that plan has required slight increases in the housing components above inflation. And it's basically to handle the added financial responsibility of the debt service that's been required to carry out these projects. So this increase is not, this year is not inconsistent with or out of line with the increases that we brought before you for several years. And there still are roughly about 5 years to go to kind of complete the whole plan. And you've seen some of the capital projects at previous meetings. So just to put in context, that's really what's driving this. And just the backgrounds, 11 new halls, 9 halls have been renovated, 5,000 beds. So this is part of the strategy in terms of paying for that. And again, the rationale tied into increasing enrollment, et cetera, student quality of life. And that's been well underway and very successful. UMKC housing and dining rates, room rates generally will go up by 1.5%. Oak Place apartments will increase 3%, and part of that is trying to get that. That's something the university acquired a couple of years ago, and we need to get that up to a market-based rent, and so that's part of what's going on there. That's primarily upperclassmen. And then food service at UMKC is outsourced to a vendor, and those increases are contractually determined. Yeah.
Aren't all the food services, aren't they all outsourced?
No. No, MU in particular runs that in-house.
Oh, okay. So Sodexo is considered our UMKC's vendor, but I thought it was up for bid this year.
I don't have the answer to that question, but we can certainly find out.
But either way, meal plan rates will increase by 3%.
Yeah, and I don't know if, Walt, if you had any more detail. Basically, our understanding was it was contractually driven this coming year. Okay. Oh, and I'm asking Walt, I apologize, I'm asking the wrong campus. Because I was thinking about S&T, because I knew that was the next slide. S&T is asking for an increase that's a little bit above 3%. And one of the points we wanted to make is that if we just tried to maintain the status quo, we could do it with an increase of about 1.5%. But given where the strategic plan is going and where the enrollment trends are going, the status quo is not something that's consistent with the strategic initiatives that we're trying to accomplish. At S&T in particular, we need to invest more in housing. And I actually think about this in the same way that MU would have thought about it when it began its track to really kind of upgrade its housing as part of a broader strategic alignment of trying to grow enrollment, et cetera. So we're asking for an additional increase that will help begin some additional funding going into residential life and housing, again, consistent with what they're trying to do strategically. The other more building issue that's come up is the residential complex, the quadrangle. Not to go into too much detail, because this will come before the board probably, I believe, in April, potentially. That residential complex is going to need to come down. In terms of the condition of the building, there are other issues with not being hooked onto the geothermal system that's coming online. So we've got to begin to make a higher, invest in housing at a higher rate than we've done. And obviously, we have the enrollment growth which is a great thing, and that's part of what's driving it. So it's just to explain the context of the requested fee increase for S&T.
Any questions of Tom with respect to this action item?
Tom, I ask this question every year, and I get the same answer, and I hope the answer is the same this year. Are these increases designed, and all the housing rates and dining rates designed to break even? In other words, we're not using housing and dining rates to subsidize academic programs, are we?
No. And I just clarify the break even, strategically, each residential life group, we need to do a little bit more than break even because we've got to set aside reserves to reinvest in the buildings. And as sort of the provider of the funding in terms of the debt that's outstanding, it's very important that, you know, we, on behalf of the board, make sure that they're investing in these facilities at levels they should. So part of the rates are designed to drive dollars going into reserves to ensure proper maintenance of these facilities.
Breaking even over the long term, basically. is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
But the S&T is designed to expand our capacity down there, the way I understand what
Well,
you're talking about.
Chancellor Schrader, did you want to?
We can
I'm happy to.
take more students down there.
Partly that is true, that we are looking to expand and grow and keep pace with the growth that we've seen. In addition, we're losing the 420-bed quadrangle. That will not be connected up with the geothermal system. And so we actually have to accelerate the removal of that quadrangle, and that's why we're looking for this increase above CPI.
Back
Any
to,
other-
I'm sorry, back to Don's question, Tom, about breaking even. You talked about bringing up the apartments at Oak Place to market level. Is that what that is about, and how do we think about that? Is that, what's market rate got to do with it? I mean, either we bring it to market rate because we can, or we bring it to market rate because we're trying to invest for the future.
Oak Place was a unique circumstance where that was originally done as a partnership with a private developer that did not manage it very well. It ultimately was driven basically into bankruptcy, and the university acquired it through sort of that process of it going back to the bank. So there are some to make that work financially, we need to make sure that we keep the rents up at market. And that was one of the things that under the previous management, they didn't do a good job of managing it. So there is room in terms of market level, and these really are more like apartment type units. Like in Columbia, you see these private developments all over the place. Oak Place is more like that than a dorm, and it's designed primarily to appeal to upperclassmen. And because of the way we acquired the property and the issues that were involved in that, we need to make sure that we're getting the revenues in to cover the costs of that acquisition.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Tom, is it correct that these rates, if approved, would be effective for the summer session of this year?
Yes.
And should that be part of the motion, in your opinion?
Yes.
I'll make, yeah. Are there other questions for Tom or any discussion? If no further discussion, we have a motion that we recommend to the board the schedule of rates presented in the materials for housing and dining at MU, UMKC, Missouri S&T, and University of Missouri St. Louis, effective beginning with the summer term in 2014. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
All committee votes in favor?
Mr. Chairman. So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
And Curator Ponder.
Yes.
Okay, all votes in favor.
Okay. The next items we're going to cover, this next action item has a number of things included in it. In your board materials on page 4-2 and 4-3, you will find the action item itself. Again, it covers a lot of different things all in the same action item. I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to go over everything except the increase in supplemental fees that have been proposed above CPI. So we'll walk through everything else first, have an opportunity to answer any questions or concerns you might have, and then we'll turn our attention to a few of the fees that if you will, are outliers. So to the extent that they're above CPI. The first thing that's a part of this would be the tuition for non-resident undergraduates and all graduate students. And typically, we'd have the resident undergraduates in this as well in a normal year, but we did want to break that out because of the unique nature of this year and to make sure the board had the option to freeze tuition. So these are the recommended rates from the campus for non-resident undergrads in the first column. So UMKC and St. Louis would be at an inflationary increase. MU and S&T, both based on just a survey of market conditions, thought that a 3% increase was consistent with market pricing that they're seeing in terms of these students from out of state, their alternative choices. All resident graduate tuition rates are recommended to increase at 1.5%, the rate of inflation. And then a similar story with non-resident graduate students. 3% market-based price increase proposed by MU and 6% by S&T, with UMKC and UMSL at 1.5%. And again, some details in your board materials, but I was not going to go into more unless there are any questions on this. Okay, the next component that's in this action item would be tuition for professional students. So again, for each of the various professional schools on the table, and this is, again, in your detailed materials, it's on page 4-6. Generally, when we bring these to the board, the discussion really is that these are driven by market conditions. So the professional schools look out, see in terms of what their revenue needs are, but just as importantly, the peer group, the competitors, what are the tuition rates looking like, and making sure that they're in a spot in the market where they want to be. You'll see several increases at just an inflationary increase. You'll see UMKC Dental School, as an example, at 0%. There's some kind of pricing differences going on with UMKC, anesthesia, and physician's assistants. They're changing the way they're pricing out-of-state tuition in that area. It's actually a revenue neutral thing. What they're doing is lowering the gross price and reducing the discount. So it's kind of, I'd call it more truth in pricing in terms of what students actually pay. So even though that shows as a 20% decrease, it's actually basically revenue neutral. It's a change in the pricing strategy.
Explain that again about the 20% being revenue neutral.
So I think the way I'd think about it is that their gross sticker price is high, and they routinely discount that a good deal. So the net price gets down to a smaller amount. What they're trying to do is just align their pricing to where that sort of net amount, closer to where the net amount is. So the sticker price will come down, but the amount of the discounting that they do will go down also. So the net revenue is about the same.
Does that balance out that way for these two specific master degree programs? Or are you talking about, does that sort out that way overall?
Well, that is specific to those two programs. Chancellor Morton, I don't know if you wanted to.
I think you've explained it very well. It's specifically for those two programs in anesthesiology and the physician's assistant program. The truth of the matter is that when we have out-of-state students that in many cases when they get to these advanced periods we're discounting so heavily, it's really not reflecting what we should be doing. What we should do is just price it at the level that we should, so that'll reduce the amount of discounting that appears in our financials.
Is the discounting across the board or on a individual student basis?
It's on an individual student basis, but when you start to add it up, we're really not charging full out-of-state to these students.
So then will there be no more discounting?
There'll be less discounting.
Okay.
I can never say never, but there'll be less discounting.
So how do you get a discount? I mean, is it knowing the chancellor or how?
No, you don't want to ask me. When early in the process, one of the questions I asked was, how many students do we really have paying true out-of-state tuition? The answer to that is not many.
For these programs?
As a matter of fact, when in some of the schools, it was pretty much understood that if you started there in your later years, you would get in-state because you'd be able to establish residency. So this is more like, as Tom put it, this is more like truth in pricing.
Is it based on financial need, or is it based on academic
I don't-
qualifications, or both, or what?
I don't think I can answer that fully. I don't know that it was really based on economic need. I don't think that was the issue. In some cases, it may have been a matter of maintaining these students who had started in the program and retaining them over time.
Who makes the decision? Does the
The
dean?
decision is made by the dean and the group of faculty within the school.
Is this done all over the university system?
Discounting?
Yeah,
Yes.
all schools, I mean, every, deans all over the place, they
We ha-
can discount if they want to discount and not?
We have different policies by the campus. We have some students that pay full boat and some students that either receive need-based scholarship or merit-based scholarship.
Yeah. But that's different than discounting.
That is discounting. Scholarship is discounting.
That's the discount.
And there's
Okay.
different forms of it.
All right, that's scholarship.
Clarify, because this raises a real concern. The out-of-state fees are what they are unless each individual student, on each individual student basis, they qualify either on a dean basis or a academic basis, and I assume that's in both cases based on a consistent policy that applies to all students for for any particular course. I guess what I'm asking, are you making deals on an individual student basis to get a student that isn't specifically based on a policy for either need or academic ability, academic record?
Isn't it based on
I-
residency?
I think, if I heard your question correctly, Curator Good, are you making deals
Yeah.
that don't
Yeah.
include need or merit? It's just a deal.
Yeah.
I'm going to let the Chancellor speak. I think the answer is no, but I would like to have the Chancellor speak to that.
Well, just to follow up, but discounting are scholarships.
Yeah,
Correct.
I just interject, we shouldn't use the term discounting, that's sort of the technical term, it's financial aid. It's
Okay.
need and merit-based financial
So
aid.
different.
Thank you.
So she-
That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, I thought there was another category I'd never heard of before.
That's right.
That's, we will banish that word, it's financial aid.
Yeah, thank you.
And the main thing that we looked at in this case is that it was designed to be revenue neutral. It's just a change in the pricing strategy, which, for whatever competitive reasons they've chose to do with this program.
But I've been worried for a long time, I've brought it up before, that particularly with out-of-state students who aren't taxpayers in the state and so forth, that we are, quote, making deals as opposed to having a consistent policy based on academic qualifications or need. And I don't have a problem with it if it's, based on need or academic, and that's consistently applied. But I guess you can pretty well assure us that there's not individual deal-making?
I can tell you that I'm confident that the chancellors aren't living in the wild, wild west, striking one-off deals with specific students. There's guidance in terms of what scholarship is available for both in-state and out-of-state residents, and that's applied in a very, very specific way so that we can give the right amount of scholarship to the right kind of student to build that student population that we want on our campus. I can say that with 100% confidence.
Well, I know we've been making a greater effort to bring in out-of-state students.
Right.
Which is good.
Yes.
But if it's not being done,
Yes, so your question, which you raised previously, which is appropriate, was, are we further discounting out-of-state students to bring them in? And we did the analysis once before and proved that it wasn't abnormal, the amount of discounting that we were doing to get out-of-state students in-state. And we can certainly do that again.
yeah, I think it's a good idea to review that because apparently the authority to do this is spread out, you know, fairly broadly, if it's down to the dean level or maybe below the dean level. So, yeah, I think that ought to be reviewed again and
Okay.
they can come
You're
back and
saying-
tell us that it's being done as we all think it is or hope it is.
But are we saying the financial need is the same whether it's a out-of-state student or in-state student? It's the same bar, the same bar as far as academically, whether it's out-of-state student or in-state student?
No.
So what's the difference?
We have two different kinds of scholarship that is customized and uniquely applied to in-state students and out-state students.
Different standards for different.
The campus can come up with how they want to use their scholarship to attract the right kind of students, both in-state and out-of-state. And as you know, we have different definitions of what a out-of-state resident is because you have the metro area view of UMSL and UMKC that's different than the definition used by S&T and MU.
I'm guessing, but don't know it to be a fact, that the deans have some discretion on programmatic reductions that aren't necessarily need or merit-based, particularly with international, when they're looking to attract under an MOU with another school in another country. So I think you need to do a footnote to that because I believe that happens. And the other question I have, Chancellor Morton said that there had been a practice, and I'm not sure if it's still true, of allowing students who spend a year on a campus to do resident tuition if they do the criteria necessary to establish residency. I trust that's still happening. It is certainly an attraction. My daughter just graduated from an out-of-state university, my stepdaughter did, under that very scenario and would not have gone had that not been the case. Are we still doing it? And is that reflected in what we're seeing here?
So we follow the guidance that's been established by the state in terms of awarding residency status. There are very specific criteria that have to be met. It's applied across the board at all public institutions, and students have the ability to apply for that, and they either meet the criteria or they don't. It's not something that we've established our own policy. We're following the policy of the state. So if they go through the process and they meet the criteria, they get residency status.
And Missouri is somewhat permissive in that respect.
I would say no. If I see at least a dozen of these a month, and at most we approve 10% of them.
In other words, you're saying they meet the state residency requirements, which includes ability to vote and get in-state driver's license.
There are 5 or 6 very explicit criteria that have to be met.
And only 10% of them meet that criteria, but if they meet it, they get in-state tuition.
Right. And the intent is to demonstrate that they have an intent to stay in the state.
For the rest of their education or for the rest of their lives?
Well, this is post-graduation. And that means,
Indefinitely. Under the statute, it's an intent to remain in the state indefinitely. and they look at various
Because you want it to
objective criteria to try to discern that intent.
Okay.
Tom, I had a question on the MU veterinary medicine proposed increase. Normally, we see these proposed increases for non-residents to be higher than residents. Why? What's the thinking behind increasing resident tuition 6% and non-resident 2.5%?
I would defer to anyone from the campus that would have any perspective on that, Rhonda.
We've been moving that over the last couple years, so you saw something similar last year. We've been out of alignment in our pricing for resident in comparison to non-residents. And so we did a market analysis, and this is what it takes to move those things into better alignment with the market.
Do you think this will be the last time? Are you there now?
There may be one more year, I think.
Okay, so the next grouping of fees covered in this action item has to do with e-learning fees. And I just wanted to stress up front, these are not tuition rates. We're going to talk about that with some context later on. These are, in essence, supplemental fees that are related to some online e-learning courses. MU is recommending that their instructional fee maximum increase to $1,000, which is still below what the maximum has been set at for S&T and UMSL. And this is sort of a market-driven instructional fee that can be added on to an online course when there's a specific purpose and there's market demand and basically the market supports it. UMSL has a proposal to restructure their CE distance learning fees. And again, think of these as supplemental fees for online courses, not the tuition. They currently have one distance learning fee that would apply across the board. And the proposal is simply to break that into 4 different components. It's revenue neutral overall, but it's an issue from their perspective of fairness because the different programs, business, education, nursing, and other, have different cost structures. And it's just an opportunity to more closely align the fees with the cost of the underlying program. So again, to be clear on this, affects a relatively smaller number of students, and it's a revenue neutral proposal that just more closely matches the underlying costs with the particular programs.
I guess I would point out that to have starting new differentiations on campuses about charging different fees for distance learning in similar areas, I think it raises the question of, are we moving toward more system uniformity, or are we having the campuses, set different fees for similar programs? I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm just saying it's another example of our having campuses go in different directions. Point of interest.
And that might be an issue that we would bring back to the board potentially at the April or June meeting and having more of a discussion about the e-learning costs and fees.
Tom, I see the proposal is to increase a maximum increase of $1,000 for the MU e-learning instructional fee. What's the maximum now?
And again, on that, I'd have to defer. I don't have that level of detail or a good example to offer. I apologize. We need to get you an answer to that question. And again, I think in this context, this is something that impacts a relatively small number of students.
Well, that was going to be another question. Who in particular is this imposed on?
Okay. I think we may need to get you that. This is probably it was at a level of detail in terms of the impact in the dollars that we didn't put that information into the board materials, but we can get you answers to those questions. I know it was part of the overall analysis of the market-based pricing for the online course, the course fees.
This doesn't give any percentages, does it?
Yeah, That's why I was asking what it is now, to see what the increase is.
We should, do we have the maximum in the, yeah, there,
I'm looking at page 4-7.
413.
Okay, maybe it's later.
Where the current maximum says 883.60.
so just going from that to 1,000. And again, I don't have the numbers of students this would impact, but I'd have to guess it's pretty small.
And that's because this is, are these students who aren't on campus? Is that what we're talking about?
Curator down there, we'd have to get you answers to those questions. Those are good questions, but we didn't, unless they. Okay.
We are confident that they're primarily used with graduate courses. It's an add-on for the fact that some of the instructional costs when you do the program online are higher. So it's a differentiated amount that we add on top to cover those additional costs. Very limited, yeah.
Any other questions on this? Okay.
I do think it's, I don't want to belabor the point, but I hope in 2 or 3 years, courses from different campuses and professors will be providing e-learning across the system. And to have one campus charge a fee and another campus charge a fee in the future doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'll give up on that point.
Those are good points, and I do think that we can bring that back in the discussion, and again, we'll get to a later action item, but we did want to come back to the board at a subsequent meeting and revisit the pricing, current pricing policies on some of those fees and rates.
Before you go on, unless there's another question on this e-learning fee, but before you go forward with the supplemental course fees, which is the next and next to last action item, we've covered a good bit already, and for purposes ultimately of having a very lengthy motion, I would just like to intervene a moment to ask us to at this point to review the action item pieces that we have just covered: undergraduate tuition, graduate tuition, professional school tuition, and the e-learning special program delivery and continuing education fee rates, to see, again, just trying to be as tidy as possible going forward to the next long list, whether there is anything at this point that you would not want to include ultimately in the motion. Do we have any further, particularly with respect to this last item?
I'm satisfied.
Are you satisfied? Does anyone want to, at this point, exclude any item that we have so far covered from the ultimate action that we take? Thanks, Tom. Let's go on with the supplemental fees.
Okay, so, and that's a great introduction into the complexity that we're getting into now. We're going to talk about supplemental course fees, and they're really broken into 4 separate buckets. So one, we have some increases that were previously approved by the board and to be phased in over multiple years. So we're not revisiting those in detail, but those were cases where an increase came before the board and it was agreed to spread it out over a number of years. So we're moving forward with those plans. We have another group of, the vast majority of the supplemental fees would have increases up to CPI, which again is 1.5%. All of those fees, just incidentally, are listed in the tables that are in your board materials from pages 4-12 all the way through 4-17. I'm not going to go over those fees that, again, either the board had approved a plan in prior years or they're coming up to CPI, but all the details in your materials. We're going to focus on supplemental fee increases greater than CPI and some proposed new supplemental fees that are new this year, and we're going to focus our discussion on that. So within the action item that Curator Covington had referred to, we're really getting into point C, and all of the line items that are listed from this point out are in essence the exceptions. So we're not explicitly listing again multi-year increases previously approved by the board. We're not explicitly listing the supplemental fee increases going up to CPI. Each of these line items is for a fee that's going up above CPI, or in point D would be new supplemental course fees that have been approved. So just to kind of set the stage again, MU, UMKC, and S&T are all requesting increases greater than CPI for some of their existing supplemental fees.
Are both the fees over the CPI included in the same motion as the ones that aren't?
They will be.
Yes.
Yes,
They're in the same motion?
yes.
I
In
would
fact,
ask for a division of the question, and these previous ones previous to the ones over to CPI be voted on separately than the ones that are over the CPI. Division of question both at the committee and at the
do we
board
need
level.
to treat that as a motion, or is there a consensus? I'm not sure whether,
I would second the motion. That way
Call it a
we vote
motion.
on them separately.
any discussion with respect to curator goods?
It may be complicated to do motions on this, and since Curator Good is on the committee, I hope that he makes the motions.
Well,
I'm happy to divide him, but it's going to get complicated.
Well, everything
Conditional
prior to
support.
this page we're on now, as I understand it, was under the CPI.
Yes, and on page 4-2, just to go specifically in the motion as it's written.
Well, generally, when there's a division of the question, the question has to be divisible. You know, still makes sense.
Right.
Which it, I think, does here. So we could take a vote now or later on the portion that's under the CPI, and then, just so we have a separate vote, we vote two motions
Right.
at the end, or take, vote on the first half of the motion now and the other half
It-
later.
Curator Good, I just wanted to highlight,
I move approval of what Curator Good just said.
just to highlight the wording, just to be transparent, in the wording of the motion, item C starts out and says supplemental fees will increase at the rate of inflation rounded to the nearest 10 cents, with the exceptions described below. So part of that would include that blanket statement, and then the first point under C, multi-year increases approved by the board last year. So I think if I understand your intent, that would be included, everything sort of above that line, or C point I, if you will. Is that,
I think so.
okay, I think that's right.
Curator Good, are you asking to divide the question because there's really no motion before the body at this point in time? Are you asking to divide the action item 4 into two parts?
Yes.
And to deal with them separately, deal with, on one motion, on what's been discussed up to the point of C in the original motion, and to deal in C with those that will increase at the rate of inflation rounded to the nearest 10 cents with the first part of the motion, and everything that follows as a second part of the motion? Cindy, are you okay with that?
And can I just clarify that first point, the multi-year increases approved by the board in prior years, are you okay with that being in this first motion?
Yes, they're under the CPI,
Well, they're,
below the CPI.
not necessarily. They're fees that were discussed by the board in prior years, and the board agreed to spread the increase over a number of years. They may be above CPI, but they've been discussed by the board previously.
I think those all ought to be voted on separately, because I think they need to be discussed separately, because I think, at the first, up to this point, I think basically what you covered are not controversial. I think the other ones are, and I think there may be discussion or motions about doing it, spreading over more years or differently, or whatever. So take the first part where it's up to what we discussed at this point. Is that a place that they can be clearly cut off?
even if some of them exceed the CPI. the ones, 'cause within the ones that
Yeah.
we've discussed thus
Okay.
far, there would be a few that do exceed. But you would be agreeable to segregating the first categories irrespective of whether
Yeah.
the CPI
Yeah,
is
those that we've
excessive.
discussed up to this point.
Okay.
Make it clear?
Maybe we should just deal with this now.
I think if
Would
you
that
have,
mean-
if you have a motion to agree to, on those that have been discussed to this point in time,
That sounds neater.
I
that would be for those fees which are discussed in action item 4, up to and including paragraph 4C, but not including any exceptions listed after 4C.
That includes the multi-year. I mean, there were some that we voted on in years past that we said, we won't approve this in 1 year, but we'll let you do it so much a year.
Okay, I think that's probably a clear place to cut it off.
Okay.
After C1?
Before the multi-year increases
After.
Or after.
or after the multi-year increases?
I think before the multi-year.
So we're going to, all the exceptions under 4C will be dealt with separately after the committee acts and the board acts on the motion as it relates to everything discussed prior to 4C.
Which is 1A, everything in 1A and 1B.
Yeah, the only thing.
And that portion of 4C, which are supplemental fees at the rate of inflation, rounded to the nearest 10 cents, as I understand it. Is that correct, Curator Good? Okay.
The only thing I would clarify, just on the multi-year fee increases, we don't have materials really to cover those. We weren't going to bring those before the board again. They're in the board materials themselves, but they had been sort of discussed and approved by the board in prior years, so we're just following through on what the agreement was with the board. I just wanted to.
If they've been approved in the past, then you don't need a motion on them, correct? Or do you?
Well, they're still going up, but they're going up by the plan that was agreed to with the board in the prior
That's been
years.
already approved.
Yes.
They don't require a vote at all.
Well, we still have to approve every fee every year. That's what the board has done.
Are we, is there, I'm hearing a consensus that we are going to, at this time, take up these initial items that we have just discussed. Is that, anybody stand apart from that? In that event, Cindy, have you with the acting general counsel?
Okay, I believe the ones that were approved for multi-year earlier should be among, in the first vote. That is, and then what we're about to start to discuss here, it would be in the second portion.
That's great. Is everybody all right with that?
That make it easily divisible?
Yes.
Madam Chairman, I would move that we approve the fees as described in paragraph 1A, B, C through C1.
Second.
Discussion.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cupps?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
All committee votes in favor for that motion.
Chairman, that is the Finance Committee's motion to the board.
Second? Second. Call the roll, please, Cindy, for the full board.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cupps?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Yes.
All board votes in favor.
Now we're ready to return to supplemental fees,
Okay.
which will be a separate action item along with perhaps item 5.
Okay.
How it goes.
So just to set the stage as we get into this, to talk about, obviously this whole discussion we're having today is something that was implemented for the first time this year in terms of giving the board an opportunity for what you're about to get in terms of having a discussion one-on-one with each of the campuses that are proposing these fees so that you can get unfiltered access and really the discussion in terms of the strategy and what's driving these increases and why it's critical and strategically important. As part of this whole sort of change in approach, we really instituted, with President Wolf's leadership, participation of Executive Vice President Foley, a very rigorous review process for these fees internally before they got to this point, which has involved multiple meetings with the campuses to discuss the funding requests to ensure that the need was there, it was demonstrated appropriately, it would have a meaningful impact in the students, and above all, would be targeted specifically to strategic initiatives. And I can tell you that we went back and forth, and this has been going on for 2 months. And I just mentioned that to say that internally the process has been extremely rigorous. I'm sure the campuses would second that. So what we're presenting today is what's been a result of a 2-month-long review process in terms of drilling down to the need and the connection with the strategic plan. So we'll have each of the campuses, again, present their case and have an opportunity to ask questions as we move through each fee. And there's just one thing, President Wolf, made me promise that I'd tie in as well as I could to the strategic plan. So I'm just, putting this up there. This is the framework for evaluating the proposals. So some subliminal advertising there. But with that, we're going to do UMKC first. And there are really 2 fees that Chancellor Morton is going to talk about, and then we'll keep moving forward.
On each one of these, can you or whoever's going to speak to it give us the percentage increase in the student who is taking this course? Basically, the base of that would be all fees and tuition currently being paid by the student, and what percent that would go up under the additional supplemental fee proposal, because I think doing it that way, it gives us a, kind of a proportional view of the impact on students.
And I think we're going to cover that. We definitely have that information in the board materials, and it should be in the presentations. If it's not, we will follow.
Yeah, but sometimes it's hard to listen and at the same time look through the board materials when some of it's here and some of it's on the computer and so forth. So if you could give us those.
Well, thank you for I have 2 fees to discuss with you. The first is from the School of Computing and Engineering. It is a supplemental fee for our students there. Fortunately, this past October, we are ABET certified. ABET is the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology. And we had a visit back in October, and that was very successful. However, we were not surprised that they had a number of recommendations for us. Our School of Computing and Engineering this year has grown 26%. And of course, that starts to stress your facilities, especially when the building's not growing at the same rate. So what they recommended was that we do a number of things in terms of increasing the access to certain technical facilities within the labs in particular, and in terms of equipment, because technology has moved ahead pretty quickly. So this fee, which affects about 1,200 students right now, almost 1,300 students in the School of Computing and Engineering, would be to cover, it would raise about $56,000 for the year. And this increase of $3.40 is about 4.9% of the current fee. And I think it brings us close to, but within 90% of the fees that are charged at other schools of engineering within the system. Now, this would cover what we call consumables within those labs. Now, in what that means is this. Within those labs, we now have what's called 3D printers. And the materials, the inks, or the other materials needed for those, very expensive. We also have a number of other pieces of equipment. And the choice that we have is to either ask the student to provide those. We don't think that's a good option.
We can get those same materials at a deeper discount than our students would be able to get them. And it also would suggest that if the students were asked to get them, they might not be able to get them at the appropriate time. So we believe this is the right answer. This is spreading this cost across all 1,200 of the 1,300, close to 1,300 students within the School of Computing and Engineering. But the ABET review team suggested we needed to make these changes within these labs to make more equipment and materials available for our students to give them the quality of education that's required. So we believe this fee is the right way to go to get there. Questions about that fee?
Leo, I think you've offered a very good justification in the materials of what you've said today on this. A specific project, a demonstrated need, a specific need for additional lab components that was raised by a third party, that you're doing it in the most economical way possible rather than ask the students to do it because they wouldn't be able to get the discount. The only thing missing from what I'd like to see in supplemental fee requests is any communication with the students about this.
Oh, absolutely. I should have mentioned that. The accreditation team actually interviewed the students while they were there, and the students were very much in favor of this. So this has student support. In fact, both of the fees I'll talk about have student support.
Of course, no discussion with the parents.
Well, didn't go quite that far.
So you're saying in most cases it's a net savings to the students? Do it this
Well,
way?
these things have to be added.
Yeah.
The question is, how can you do it efficiently and effectively? Most of the materials that we are buying, if they had to buy them on the market, they'd pay twice what we'd have to pay for
They're
them.
not buying them now?
No. This is new. A lot of this is new because technologies have changed. We're introducing 3D printers and the like that they haven't been around a long time. Any other questions about that one? The next one is the School of Education course fee. There's a $2 increase on that fee. That fee was first introduced, I think, 7 or 8 years ago, and it was $10 at the time. This fee is, we haven't introduced this fee because it's the Missouri State Board of Education has put a requirement out there that I think is a very, very good one. They are requiring that all of our students in the School of Education record themselves as they in delivering their course material. I think that's a very good addition for the students that, so that they can see themselves in the process of course delivery. However, it means that we have to get the equipment to allow us to do that, and so that our students can check this out and check out the equipment, do the recording, and the editing, if necessary. Hopefully not a lot of editing, but get prepared to meet those standards. So this is something we believe is very important. The students are in favor of this and support this increase as well. Questions?
This is a requirement for all
Schools of education. Schools of education. It says that if you're going to teach, you need to see how you look and how you present in front of students.
At all institutions?
Yes. This is a Missouri State Board of Education standards requirement.
Thought I had to pay that.
Any questions about this
Modest
one?
increase is
Beg pardon?
modest increase, $2 per student.
$2 per student, yes. Any other questions? If not, I'd be happy to move on. And
Thank you.
Now, if Chancellor Schrader would come up, and we'll go over the proposals from S&T.
Well, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present our supplemental fee increases. As you know, every decision that we make is grounded in our strategic plan, so I thought it would be very appropriate to look at the mission, the vision, and also our strategy. We integrate education, research, and application, not only to create knowledge, but also to convey it in a way that really serves our state and tackles some of the greatest challenges worldwide. Our vision is to be the leading public technological research university known for its discovery, creativity, and innovation. Of course, our strategy statement is to be by the year 2020, provide by the year 2020, which is our 150th year as an institution, a top return on investment among public research universities to some very specific customers. The students, employers of our students, our research partners, and donors. By taking advantage of what's unique about us and providing that extraordinary access to expertise, to unique capabilities and services, and also to experiential learning opportunities. Quite a challenge, I think you can agree. First, I wanted to talk about our enrollment trends. And so the table at the top of this slide is important to look at. Overall, our enrollment at Missouri S&T has grown by 76% since the year 2000. Engineering has grown even at a faster rate, at an 85% increase. Our freshman engineering class, you can see, has grown at a rate of 118% over that time period, which gives you some idea of the projected growth that we expect in the future. Our math and science programs have grown by 76%, and our business and information systems technology programs have grown by 298%. And it's important to know that those programs began only in 2002, so it's a shorter time period that those programs have seen that extraordinary growth. And to give you an example of what's happened last year alone, business and information technology programs grew by 22%. I want to talk for a moment about the impact of these enrollment growths. These growths do impact all programs campus-wide. There's a number of constraints that we have with regard to these enrollments. One of those is space, and a limitation on the ability to raise the class size in some instances, and let me talk about that. In particular, we have a large number of laboratory-based courses, and those laboratories are limited by physical space. They're often limited by the equipment that we have in there, the number of workstations, and also often they're limited by safety. So as you can imagine, our faculty are teaching more. And they have, by the way, by far the lowest teaching waivers of any campus in the system. And of course, there's a trade-off in productivity and other very, very important strategic areas such as research and technology transfer. We are concerned about maintaining the quality of our programs. These increases, which you can see are dramatic, place just an incredible demand on our resources. And if you take a look at our enrollment growth total from 2000 to 2013, we are changing from a small institution to a mid-size institution. I want to focus as well on our business and information systems technology programs. A year ago, we received AACSB accreditation. We knew that would mean a dramatic increase in our enrollments. And as I mentioned, over the last year, we increased 22%, but we expect that dramatic growth to continue. Of course, when you do have accreditation, I know Chancellor Morton referred to ABET accreditation, there are some guidelines and requirements that you need to be paying attention to. For AACSB, there's a requirement of a certain student-to-faculty ratio, and also requirements for specific levels of scholarly production from your faculty, as an example. The faculty in the business area also command high salaries, and we believe that we are very, very visible, especially since we have been ranked in the top 50 public online graduate programs for our MBA program. So there's a lot of attention in that program. Over this same time period, you can see that our faculty has increased only by 3%. And so again, it's been quite a challenge for us. We are accommodating many, many more students, being quite innovative in our approaches, but there is a pent-up demand and a lot of stress on the faculty. I just wanted to briefly compare our in-state cost of attendance to those institutions where we compete for all majors, not just STEM majors. And you'll notice that we are rather low among those comparators. I think I want to mention as well that we do have a three-pronged approach in looking at our need for addressing our strategic plan and reaching our goals. The first is that we are very aggressive at looking at alternative revenue sources, such as gifts, grants, and distance education programs. The second is that we really are making very, very hard decisions in reallocation, and that is apparent as well. And then, of course, is student tuition and fees. And we are very concerned about continuing to be affordable and accessible. So we do stress a balanced approach. In terms of the reallocation, if I can expand upon that for a moment, we have reallocated faculty lines in a way that aligns with our strategic plan, both new additional faculty lines and also vacant faculty lines. We have selected some strategic best-in-class areas so that we can focus our efforts in a very limited number of areas where we can truly be at the top nationally. We've reduced programs along the way. We are focusing, of course, on those 6 key customers that I mentioned before. And we also are looking very carefully into our campus master plan and our space allocation as one of the resources that we do have. So our supplemental fee proposal is listed here. You can see the increases for engineering and our science fees and also our business and information technology fees. The cost impact per year for the typical student is $191. I do want to mention that we have had conversations with our student leadership, and they are in support of these proposals. In fact, we actually brought to them a larger number originally because that had included an increase in tuition as well. To give you some sense of where these fees will apply, I mentioned, of course, the strain on our faculty and the requirements to keep that student-faculty ratio as low as possible. We will be hiring full-time faculty, but also part-time faculty and graduate teaching assistants. We last year had our first priority for Lever 2.2 funding, which was to do the first phase of hiring an additional 100 faculty by the year 2020. And a portion of that plan, which was approved, was directly related to the increase in the student fees. In addition, the part-time faculty and GTA positions are really positions that allow us to be responsive to this rapid growth. Last year alone, overall at the university, we increased 6%, and it was really a scramble in the fall to make sure that we could serve all those students in the best way possible. In addition, the graduate teaching assistants will allow us to be recruiting more doctoral students, which is an important part of our strategic plan. Yes?
So the differences that you mentioned of like $11, $5, all of that entirely is going toward faculty?
Yes, yes, yes. There are many, many needs. And again, as I mentioned, we're trying to have a balanced approach. And this is a direct way of helping the students with this fee. And the students are very interested in knowing that the wait lists will decrease and that it also may help them progress further toward graduation if they can get the courses they need when they need them.
How many faculty members will this allow you to, or teaching staff, will this allow you to do? And also, after last year, how many, the goal towards 100 new faculty positions or teaching positions, how many have you gotten now?
So we were able to identify funding for 33 additional faculty, in part due to the acceptance and approval of our first priority strategic initiative plan. We have allocated 18 of those lines already, and departments are trying to, no, not hired.
Oh, okay.
Departments are now in the process of advertising, but those 18 we would hope would be on board in the fall, and the remaining would be hired for fall 2015.
So what was the 33 number?
So the 33 number came about from our strategic initiative priority number 1, where new monies that came into the system would be applied to hire 22 of those faculty, and the campus, through various means, including the student fees, would be able to hire the additional 11. Those numbers were estimated on a 2% growth, not the 6% that we actually realized last fall.
How did we get from 22 to 18?
There's a total of 33 over 2 years.
Okay.
Okay. We have allocated 18 of those 33 already
To the department?
to the departments,
Okay.
and they are based on the impact on the strategic plan. And they are in the process of hiring. We would hope that they would be here in fall of 2014. The remaining would be here in fall of 2015.
And then the additional 11 would come from these funds?
Not all, but in part from these funds. And that's from the full-time faculty.
So how many hours of the faculty teaching? How many hours is an average professor teaching?
Well, I know that there is a collected rule that addresses teaching, and actually here at Missouri S&T, our faculty are in the classroom at a much higher rate than the other campuses.
What's that number, 6 hours? 8
So
hours?
I believe it's, perhaps you can help me, I believe it's 2 courses.
Student credit hours per semester. Someone else can jump in if they would like. And certain number of courses, which that corresponds to, which I think is 3. Is that about right, Ken?
12 section credit hours.
12 section credit hours. Thank you.
They're teaching 12 hours a semester?
Yeah.
Is it?
That's per year.
Oh, per year, sorry.
6 hours per semester. And then, so with this growth of students, what's happened to your student-faculty ratio?
It's
What is it?
increased quite
To
substantially.
what? I mean, are you gone to 20 to 40?
We went from 14 to 21.
That's how you accommodate all this growth of students.
And I guess I would like to point out that for those disciplines that are laboratory-based, the student-faculty ratio is usually much, much lower, in the 14 range, because of the very small sections that are taught in a laboratory setting.
We have a goal of 10,000 students by 2020?
We do not have, we have not set a number of students as our goal, but rather we are looking at shaping the student body in a way that helps increase the student experience.
So if 11 faculty positions will be filled by the supplemental fees and this doesn't do it, then we'll have another one of these next year? Is that a fair assumption?
Not for those 33 faculty. We have already reallocated in ways to cover the rest of that.
Chancellor, I have a few questions, and, you know, I'm struggling here because it's no secret that I've not been a fan of supplemental fees over the years, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for what you're doing on the campus down there and what the campus is doing. And so let me ask a few questions. What percentage of your overall student body would be affected by these supplemental fees?
I believe it would be 80 to 85%.
And we have just approved, I think, a large tuition increase, I think of 6% for undergraduate non-residents at your campus. Is that?
No, for undergraduate non-residents, it's 3%.
Graduate non-residents?
Graduate
6%.
non-residents is 6%.
And then, and again, we don't know if the governor's recommendation is going to be approved or not, but we're looking at an additional $44 million system-wide. 3% STEM, which I believe the president has said is $12 million, would position your campus in a very good position to get a good chunk of the $12 million, if we get that. Is that right?
That,
You would hope.
We would hope.
There is a, can I just comment?
Sure.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
Just, we're going to go through the process and have a good, healthy discussion about how to allocate that additional $12 million on the STEM-related objective. One of the things that you have to be careful on when you add up those numbers, like, for example, the $12 million for mental health, there's additional expenses that are going to be needed to, because you're expanding existing class size. So that's just not free money. There's expenses involved in implementing and making the commitments of increasing class size and getting those additional graduates that we would project out for caring for Missourians Phase 2. So I can speak on behalf of the chancellors, is that when you build up the plan, they're not assuming right now that that mental health expansion is included, correct? It's that if in fact that gets approved, then those will be incremental expenses. So I just want you to consider that these incremental dollars, how they get applied, we have to think through that and the cost that what we sign up for, like in the mental health, we have to consider that when we put together our final budgets. But
understood.
Okay.
I'm really just trying to come to grips with how critical this need is on your campus, given additional resources that you're likely to get from the state and additional tuition money you're likely to get from the increases we've just, you know, I know you have a significant amount of students that aren't from the state of Missouri. And for those students, they're going to be paying 3 or 6% higher tuition. And, you know, I want to support the Raleigh campus, and I feel very strongly that we need to develop more engineers and scientists that you're doing on that campus. But I really want to get a sense of how critical it is that we hit 82% of the students with this fee this year in particular when we have other resources coming in.
It's absolutely critical. I can give you a couple of examples of what happened just in our not being able to accommodate the 6% growth from this last year. This spring, we had a transfer student who was unable to get into engineering physics and so will not be coming to Missouri S&T until the fall, and that's a Missouri student. So the students are not able to progress through their degrees, and that's costing them more, and it's costing the university more. It's not an effective use of our resources. In addition, I mean, we are rapidly approaching capacity in many of our engineering disciplines and also computer science. And this last week, I had a conversation with enrollment management, and they are looking at recommending capping engineering and computer science. Again, because we are concerned, we see the numbers, we know we're going to have another great enrollment boost, and we want to make sure that we can serve those students that are admitted and enroll at S&T. So it is very critical, and it's critical now for the fall.
Is your capacity limited by, is your capacity limited by a number of faculty or physical facilities? Because if you're talking about labs, that's what you're bumping up against, not the additional faculty money that we're looking at.
Well, it's limited Both. And so we're addressing the instructional laboratories also by some strategic initiative funding that we were awarded last year. We have $500,000 that's matched dollar for dollar by non-appropriated sources, gifts and grants. And we're going around and systematically improving the instructional labs. But as Chancellor Morton mentioned, that's just not keeping pace with the demand. What our focus is for these supplemental fees, however, is on faculty, because when you bump up against that physical space or that equipment limitation, you have to open multiple sections. And when you open multiple sections, that puts an additional drain on the faculty.
Maybe I could jump in with some relevant numbers for the curators on this point. At S&T, there are 277 or so eligible faculty who are actively teaching. Right now, according to the CRR, they have to be, as we said before, at 180 student credit hours / 12 section credits. That's specified. Cheryl has 206 out of 207 faculty who are at that or above, all right, to give you a sense of it. So she only has 26% who are at that or below, all right? So almost everyone is really teaching full out. 75% are teaching at a very, very high level at S&T right now. I think that goes to your question, Curator Ponder, about human capacity. And the human capacity there is being used exceptionally well, very high effectiveness.
Let me make a cautionary note that I'm concerned, and I'm going to be in favor of this as a safety net this year only, but to ask for supplemental fee increases from students in the form of faculty salaries, whether it's increases or whether it's new faculty, doesn't seem to me to be the right way to do this in the long term. And it may be likely that we'll get additional funds, but it's no guarantee. And you're in a critical point, and we have strapped faculty, and we all recognize you're doing innovative things there, including experiential learning and including e-learning. But in the future, I hope you don't come back during my tenure with additional salary increases or additional increases to faculty through a supplemental fee increase. So I'm just saying, you know, we're at the critical point on your campus. It is STEM related. That's an emphasis for all of us. But I hope that this is a one-time request for years into the future. And to repeat a refrain, you know, I'm not much in favor of bricks and mortar anymore. I'm more in favor of e-learning. And to the extent that you're already into that and doing, you know, a pretty good job with that, I would think that we can extend our faculty through accelerated use of quality e-learning. And reallocation of resources in that manner may help us in the future.
And thank you for sharing that. I think that that's a very important point, and I would like to emphasize how critical these faculty are to our strategic plan. As I mentioned, it was our #1 strategic initiative priority, which is to leverage S&T as Missouri's technological research university. Included as actions under that lever is to increase our undergraduate enrollment by 500, our PhD enrollment quite substantially by 200 to 400, and also, again, the number of faculty, as I mentioned. This lever actually, and the 100 faculty actually impacts 13 different levers in our strategic plan that are tied directly to our ability to meet our goals and are tied directly to adding new and part-time faculty and graduate instructors. And I know you haven't memorized all those numbers, so I've just briefly written what those levers describe, and I just want to highlight a few of them for you. As was mentioned, we are going to be requiring all undergraduate students to have a significant experiential learning opportunity before graduation, and that, of course, means that we have increased faculty-student interaction. So our faculty, again, are committed in many, many other ways. Lever 2.1 is to employ transformative and focused faculty hiring and retention, including cluster hires in select areas of expertise. We have just selected 2 of those 4 areas. One is advanced manufacturing, and the other is advanced materials for sustainable infrastructure, both very, very important and critical issues for the state of Missouri. And so we are focusing, again, we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but we are looking at those areas where we can be truly best in class. And then another one I want to highlight is to create a comprehensive distance and online education strategy, so that that also means that faculty time will be involved in some other ways of providing access to many more students. And then finally, lever 4.5 at the bottom is to engage in transformative doctoral student recruiting, retention, and placement. That's a 200 to 400 doctoral students, and the graduate teaching assistantship piece of the supplemental fees will help us to attract and retain some of the top students.
What was the timetable on that 500, 2 to 400?
Our timetable is by 2020.
That last slide, okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer an additional comment?
There's your
Sorry,
chair.
Madam Chairperson. Dr. Schrader, I joined Curator Downing in being skeptical of fee increases. But I want to tell you, I applaud your presentation for the reason that I think one of the primary questions we should ask ourselves, especially when we're looking at fee increases, is it good for students? And you've done a good job in convincing me that you've struck the right balance here between providing what the students need and increasing the quality of education without overburdening them. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might add to that, Curator Ponder, we really have that customer-focused approach. And so we are asking every time we make a decision, every time we invest, how is this helping us increase the return on investment to those particular customers? And again, out of our 6 key customer groups, 3 of those are specific student groups.
I know we all understand that you believe this is the right thing to do, and you tell a convincing story. We've always been told that enrollment growth is a good thing, not a bad thing, both for the campus and for the system. And generally, we've been told that when there's student growth, that the costs per student, total cost goes up, cost per student goes down because you're spreading the fixed costs over more students and so forth. I guess at some point that reaches a limit, and maybe that's what you're saying here, but when you reach that limit, does it make sense to continue to try to grow, particularly when you're hitting several limits at the same time, your physical facility limits, faculty limits, and I guess at that point, maybe it's no longer spreading costs, and the cost per student, may not be going down. I don't know. You haven't given us those figures, but if you run up to a whole bunch of barriers, do you have, or should you be considering limits? Does that make sense?
I will tell you that we have many, many conversations about that, and we're really striking a balance between ensuring the quality of the programs that we offer and the experiences that people have come to expect from Missouri S&T, and also being able to provide that access to very, very capable and interested students in STEM. So, one of the things we're very conscious of is the need for the state of Missouri and the nation to increase the number of STEM majors. And so if we were to provide a limit on that, it might be difficult for the system to meet some of the goals that it has, and certainly for the state of Missouri, because we have such a large impact in those areas.
You're going to be around tomorrow when we're talking about revenue growth, I guess.
You bet, you bet. And, you know, I will point out that we are aggressively looking at ways to come up with alternative revenue, which has helped us really accommodate this growth. Also, we're doing innovative ways so that we are most effective with those resources that we do have.
Would it make sense, and we, obviously from the earlier conversation, we've done this in the past, to spread this fee increase over several years instead of all in 1 year?
Well, again, I mentioned that this last fall, we had quite a challenge in accommodating the 600 additional students that showed up at our doorstep. The numbers are running stronger than that already, and I know that that's different than what's happening on many of the other campuses. We're concerned that we will not be in a position to accommodate those students coming in the fall.
So if you get this fee increase and you hire the faculty that you talked about, you still have a place to put the students on campus?
Yes, you know, we are going through a campus master plan. We have hired a consultant, and we'll be bringing to the board that plan for review and approval in April. So we are also, of course, looking at all of the aspects of growth, not just the ability to conduct the courses.
The impact of that master plan probably won't hit the campus in terms of new space for 3 or 4 years, or maybe more if we continue to not get any capital money or almost no capital money from the state. So you can, you know,
so to
it's
give
good
you
to do the planning, but you know, it might be some time. So anyway, with probably no additional space other than what you might be moving around, is there space available for the next couple years until?
So Curator Good, just to give you a preview of what you'll see in April, we hired a consultant that was that also specializes in space allocation, and so they have conducted a very detailed audit of our space, and we actually have a surplus of space, of certain kinds of space, and a deficit of other kinds of space. So the ability to accommodate the growth along with some measured additions in new buildings exists. We're currently looking at how we might reallocate the space or use the space that we have more effectively.
And that's what you'll do over the next couple of years?
Oh yes, we're already doing it.
Yeah, I know you're already doing it, but you're asking for more money here to hire more faculty, so that's and you're saying that's going to be teaching more classes.
Correct.
So you have the space for those classes with this reallocation over the next 2 or 3 years, which is probably the shortest time before you can get new space.
Correct. Yes. So we are looking at using our existing space in a way to maximize what we have in addition to new space. So we will be able to accommodate that in terms of the space perspective, faculty as well as students.
I think we all understand it's a significant challenge. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chancellor Schrader at this point? Thank you very much, Chancellor. And
thank you.
Tom, back to you. Ready for MU?
We got to vote on this?
I think there's
Take all the rest.
Yeah, all the rest of it is, I think.
At once.
I'm going to want all these at once.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Unless somebody asks to divide.
Wants to divide the question again.
Subdivide the question.
Thank you. I appreciate being here this afternoon to make this proposal to you. I realize that I'm going to answer some questions that have been raised that probably will apply to us too, so I'm anticipating that. But let me lay the groundwork for this just a little bit. About 1.5 years ago, we began an intensive strategic planning process that involved faculty, staff, students on our campus that developed into our operating plan, a 5-year operating plan. That draft was sent last summer to the system. We made revisions to it in the fall and resubmitted it in October. And it represents a fairly, more than a fairly dramatic change in how we've been doing business, a change from the past. And this strategic plan has one large component to it that I'm going to demonstrate to you in just a moment, or show to you in just a moment, and that is that we're going to be reallocating each year 2% of the general operating base budget in all of our units to the plan. In essence, we will recover that 2% at the campus level and distribute it based upon the priorities that have been set out in the strategic plan. We visited with the faculty, with the deans, and we have buy-in to that. It is going to be very challenging for us to do that reallocation, but we are committed to doing it. What it will enable us to do is to reinvest in ourselves in a way that we can improve our metrics with regard to the AAU, to help us maintain our level of a Carnegie very high research institution, but I think more importantly, to provide a world-class education to our students.
How much is that 2%?
2%, all right, let's see. Well, actually, that's what it will be for next year.
7 million?
But it's 70? I'm 7 million a year, sorry, that's right.
7 million out of how much, out of the total budgets?
All right.
Divide by 0.02.
0.02 times 500.
Apply by 100,
Rhonda, you
then
can answer it
multiply by
better
two.
than I can.
2% of 500 million is more
It's
than
based
7.
on 350 million that we would take 2%, get 7 million a year.
That's not your total budget, 350 million.
It's the part that we can reallocate. We have over a $500 million general budget, but there's certain parts like the utilities budget and things like that that we can't subject to the 2% reallocation.
The part that you can reallocate.
Right.
The 350, it's 2% of the 350.
Right. And what escalates that is we also are asking them to give raises and cover their benefit increases internally to their budgets. So we're not going to be giving them through the strategic plan those set of general resources. They're asked to reallocate those as well. So that's part of what makes our reallocation number very significant, because people are having to take 2% off the top of what they're used to getting each year for those years in a row, plus provide some number of raises, plus cover their own benefit increases.
So it adds up to quite a bit more than, as you're going to see in just a moment, than the $7 million a year. So what we're asking you for today is to help us in helping us achieve our strategic plan goals and priorities. You're going to see how we're going to do that in just a moment. If you look at this first slide, you'll see that our reallocation, that we need $60 million that we've that we've planned for implementation of the strategic plan next year. Of that $60 million, reallocation is a little over $37 million, a significant portion of it we are going to be doing internally. The rest of it is made up of what we expect to receive in the performance funding from the state this next year. That's $5.1 million, could be more, could be less. That's what we're planning on. Enrollment change, and then I'll get to the last one in just a second. The enrollment change of $7.5 million is the mix of students. We expect a slight enrollment increase. We'll have some more medical students. And the mix of students resident versus non-resident will help us achieve that figure. The other one, the rate increase that is shown on there, is two primary parts to that. One is the 3% increase in non-resident tuition. That's about half of that figure. And the other half is the $5 million that we're going to talk about today of net new revenues from supplemental fees. So let's look at what the proposal is. We're requesting, well, of course, the first item you've already been faced with, and that's requesting that all supplemental fees presented increase by CPI. 2 new fees, one in engineering and one in arts and science at the 2,000 level and above. And then there are some select supplemental fees that I'll get into later on that relate to increases that are above the CPI. And we'll go through each of those individually, and you can see what we're asking for. The last item is a change in the tuition rate for undergraduate, distance, non-residents. I'll talk about that at the very end, but we're trying to become market competitive there, and I'll explain what the issues are. So let's look at engineering. There are 3 primary factors that are driving our current situation with regard to the College of Engineering, and that will provide a backdrop for what we believe is a fee as an appropriate option to help address the problem. High demand, you've seen that already at S&T. We have experienced similar high demand. It's higher cost. Engineering is a higher cost program, and higher starting salaries for engineering graduates. So there is the ability there for students to pay more for what they are getting. Let's look at what has occurred in our enrollment pattern over the last several years. Since 2004, we've had a 77% increase in our enrollment in engineering compared to a campus increase over that period of time of 29%. You'll see that our engineering students are of very high quality and that their graduation rate is better than our campus graduation rate. The 6-year graduation rate for our engineering students is 76.3% compared to a little over 70% for the campus as a whole.
How many do you have there? How many people?
There are 3,200 approximately engineering students who are either pre-engineering or in engineering, and they're all counted because the engineering school has to deal with them. It's about 3,200 undergraduates. We have attempted to address this problem of the increasing enrollments in engineering by doing internal reallocation. Our resources over the last 5 years, which have been driven primarily by enrollment growth, as pointed out earlier, and the student mix, the in-state, out-of-state mix, has been a 22% growth. We've allocated more than that to engineering, 28%. But there's only so much that we can do with that internal reallocation. You'll see that the credit hour production for engineering has increased 45% over the last 5 years. The campus in general about 23%. So we've been experiencing growth across the campus, just a little higher in engineering and a couple of other discipline areas. So what's the enrollment growth impact been on engineering? Higher student-faculty ratios. It impacts the student experience. And it also has an impact on research productivity. Our faculty teach more. In every one of our departments in engineering, the student credit hour production per tenure-track faculty member is at or above the national comparator group of 75 research-intensive universities. So our faculty are teaching heavy loads. That ultimately has an impact upon the quality of the student experience, has a quality and on the research productivity of the faculty.
And is that including the pre-engineering students?
Yes.
And are the other institutions also including pre-engineering students? Are we comparing apples to
Yes,
apples?
we are. These are data that are reported to ABET, and so all the institutions report in a consistent way. So when you look at our engineering student-faculty ratio throughout the college, it's 32-1. Campus-wide, it's 21-1. And the AAU average, to which we like to compare ourselves, is 20-1. So we're off the mark. But let me give you a dramatic example here. Let's look at mechanical and aerospace engineering. This slide shows all of the AAU publics. See where MU is? On the far left side. This is 2012 data. We were 44-1 student-faculty ratio in that department. This year, it's 47-1. So this was the comparative for 12. That's the last that we had all institutions. You go down, you have University of Michigan on the other end at 11-1. We'd be very happy if we could be somewhere in that upper 20s, 27, 28, 29, would get us a long ways toward where we want to go. And what we're going to be proposing will help us in that regard.
These aren't pre-engineering, these are actually in engineering
Yes,
majors
these
right
are
now.
actually engineering majors here in this particular group, yes. So what we're proposing today is an engineering fee. This is part of a 5-year strategy. We're not asking you to approve a 5-year set of fees, but we want you to know where we're headed on this, what our thinking is. $30 new fee for resident students and a $70 new fee for non-resident students. We will be coming back asking you for similar increases in the next 4 years in order to get this done. This will create approximately $1.5 million in new revenue to the college after year 1 and about $6 million after it's fully phased in. We are going to be spending the money on the high priorities of our strategic plan. Everything you're going to see today is directly related to the strategic plan that we have developed in the same way that you've seen it from S&T. We want to hire 20 new tenure-track faculty. We want to give raises to high-performing faculty and staff. And then we have equipment needs, we have minor space renovation needs. The major space renovation needs you're going to hear about on Friday when Gary talks to you about Laffrey Hall. And then a few instructors and other teaching support that will be needed to help this occur. We're not going to hire 20 in 1 year. This is our 5-year plan, 20 over 5 years.
This is $30 per student per semester?
Per student credit hour.
Per credit hour.
So if a student takes 15 credit hours in a semester, it would be 30 times 15. If they were taking all engineering courses. This is only engineering courses, only engineering courses. So at most, it's going to apply to those, I shouldn't say at most, it would normally apply to those 3,200 engineering students that we have. We might have some other students that might take an engineering course for some reason. That doesn't happen too often, but there are some students in other disciplines who might take maybe an introductory engineering course of some kind.
So Ken, that would be, if I'm doing my math off the top of my head right, that's
15 hours would be $450.
$450, $900 a year.
I'll get to what we have calculated as the impact
Okay.
on various students, and first-year student, senior student, that sort of thing. So that's the next slide. For resident students, because a freshman doesn't take very many engineering courses, the impact is going to be fairly minor. Minor in the sense of amount, relatively speaking. But for the senior who might be taking all courses, 30 hours times $30, $900. They might be taking a little less, might be taking a little more, but this is our best guesstimate as to the average. The non-resident students, you see a similar effect, but it's larger because we're charging a larger fee to the non-resident student, or proposing a larger fee to a non-resident student. And you might ask, well, how do the students feel about this? In your materials, you should have a slide that shows a letter from the student body, and the print's kind of small, but If you look at about the third line down, they express concern about high student-to-faculty ratios, need for equipment and software replacement, and space to support student teams and capstone projects. The students are aware of it. They're aware that and they support this fee. So let's talk about what the impact is.
Back to that letter for a
Sorry.
second.
Yep.
So require that tuition be increased to compensate for the lack of state funding. Is it talking about the fee, or is it talking about variable separate tuition? What is that?
When this was first discussed with the students, it was in the form of a differential tuition for engineering. This represents the fee. In a different form, it represents the same amount that the differential tuition would have generated. So there's been no change in the dollar amounts, the net dollar amounts. But that's why the reference there. So how do we look compared to other states? And this is a very interesting chart because it shows what our undergraduate cost is per engineering student compared to state support per student credit hour. That's the only way we could calculate it because state support is usually calculated as a annual per capita cost, per head cost. We've taken that figure and divided it into a student credit hour amount. To give you some comparative figures, you see that we're right in the middle of the pack with other AAU institutions in terms of cost per credit hour to a resident student. There's another thing that is very telling when you look at this. There is a very high correlation between low state dollar support and higher tuition. That pattern follows throughout. So you see in there, as the state support goes up, the tuition is lower. And as the state support goes down, there are a couple of outliers on there, and we put those in just to show you. These are select, but they're not selected to try and make a particular point. They are indeed representative of the pattern that you will see if you looked at all of the AAU institutions. So we're going to stay in the middle of the pack with regard to how we look compared to our competitors in terms of cost per credit hour. The next slide, you might ask, well, what about the fee on the out-of-state students? Is that going to make you non-competitive for out-of-state students who are interested in coming here? Again, looking at a select group of states and the AAU institutions in those states, we're right in the middle of the pack. So we should be competitive for the out-of-state students in the same way that any other of those institutions would be competitive. I keep putting Michigan on there because I want you to see how much they charge and what they're able to do with their student-faculty ratios and also with their research productivity and everything else. We're not asking to become Michigan.
Ken, do these numbers reflect the proposed increase?
Yes. If you notice, it's MU proposed on there, and we have assumed in those other states a 2% increase for our comparative schools. I will be shocked if it is that low at the comparative schools in tuition increases. So that's the engineering fee, and I know that Curator Covington wanted us to stop after each one of these fees. I'm going to move next to the arts and science fee, but that's the information on the engineering fee. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Well, this isn't a question, but the students' support is unfortunately worded because it touches on the concerns that many of us on the board have about, I mean, they referred to it as a variable tuition, and you know, Missouri is caught in the ability to raise tuition and the decreasing state funding, and so we have that dilemma. But I'll make the same comment that I made when S&T was making its case, that I hope that this is the only year that we see this. I think you said years in the future, but if the governor and the legislature do what we hope they will, which gives us relief in a different way, hope you don't come back next year.
You mean with a fee increase?
Well, with a fee increase, correct. Because if we get all or a substantial portion of what the governor is now proposing, I think that's a more appropriate way of addressing faculty ratio issues than jacking up the student fees every year. So I'm just saying, this year is a safety net, and it's a pass, at least for me. But if you come back next year and the governor is successful with the legislature, I probably won't be in favor of it.
I agree. We're always talking about finding different sources of revenue, and I understand that revenue is probably the correct terminology here, but still, for me, thinking about, as a student, system considering my supplemental fees as a variable revenue that they can increase if they need more revenue is really scary. Because I already thought that tuition was kind of the way that, that's where I pay all of my money towards, so thinking of constantly increasing fees is a pretty scary thing.
And I fully understand where you're coming from on that. This is, again, a targeted fee to a targeted group of individuals in engineering who are in high demand, high paying, high cost to us producing jobs. So we're focusing the fee on those students who are able to pay it. That would be my...
If it's high demand in engineering, maybe we should be reallocating from other schools who, number one, aren't in the STEM program, number two, don't have the kind of a demand. I mean, there are other ways of reallocating. You're doing it partially through the, what is it, 7,000?
The 2% reallocation.
But I think that's within schools, but you can reallocate strategically as well. You can not build as many buildings. You can partner more with private institutions. So,
and we are doing all of those things.
Maybe not enough.
Maybe, I mean, I take you back to this slide that shows that everything has been growing and that we have done some reallocation to engineering, and we're going to continue to do that. So,
Just let me make a generic comment to John's point. I think what we all have to successfully educate, convince the Board of Curators as well as our external constituents is when we take a look at our strategic plan and our objectives and our performance, as we look at the levers which define our priorities and the monies that we spent and the results of that, are we doing enough in terms of that reallocation to meet the strategic priorities, or should we be doing more? We should be thinking about the last lever to pull is anything that affects the cost of the student. We should be thinking about how we can get money elsewhere, be it from the state, be it from donors, be it through reallocation. We've got to continually be passionate about trying to figure that out. And when we come to you this time next year, talking about the progress that we've made and where we made investments and the return on that investments and reallocation, if it's not compelling enough and convincing, you absolutely have the right to say, I don't think we need to do this because I don't think those trade-offs are being made and you're allocating the monies in the right way that you should. And so I will take, on behalf of the 4 campuses, I will commit to you that we will have that very in-depth conversation, and we need to.
and we fully expect to come back to you and give you a report on how we've used the funds and what we've done with what progress we've made. Okay, so I want to go to the next one, which is arts and science. And so let me lay the groundwork for this a little bit. Arts and science produces about 40% of the STEM degrees that our campus produces. So engineering is very important, but arts and science is foundational. It's foundational to engineering, and it's foundational to almost every discipline on campus. Some of you went through the arts and science school here, and you know that. You know that that's where a lot of your education occurred. So it's foundational to the other STEM disciplines. Virtually every STEM graduate's taken a course, and as I said, about 40% have of the degrees granted in arts and science are STEM-related courses. In recent years, though, we've had real problems with being able to update and improve our laboratories and equipment in the College of Arts and Science. We have surveyed that there are about 75 labs. They range from physics to chemistry to anthropology to psychology to a variety of labs that need some form of improvement, renovation. Some of them are currently offline and need to be improved. And the cost is an average of about $240,000 per lab. Our faculty salaries in arts and science are among the lowest compared to our AAU peers. They are the third lowest of those on campus. There are two other colleges that are a little lower than arts and science, but arts and science is off the mark in comparison to our AAU peers. And as we all know, tenure-track faculty have not grown in recent years. So the proposal is a 4-year phased-in fee. So we are asking here today for approval of a 4-year phased-in fee, starting at $25 and ramping up to $40 over that period of time. It would apply to all 2,000 level courses on campus. I'm sorry, in arts and science. And that represents about 22% of the student credit hours that are taught on campus. And now let me point out that the next line there says that we're talking about eliminating all lab fees. What we're proposing here is you have currently approved lab fees for us to be phased in this next year. It goes to right at $21. Those lab fees would be done away with, and there'd be one fee applied across all 2,000 level courses.
How many of the 2,000 level courses currently have lab fees?
About half. Not quite, but about half. And I say that because we have some 1,000 level courses that have lab fees. Those will go away. So some of the 1,000 level courses where there is a lab and we have a fee associated with, we're doing away with. There will be no fees charged on any of the 1,000 level courses.
So what's the set-off, the net set-off against the 25 moving up to 40?
All right, so in year one, we're going to generate 1.8 million of new revenue. If this were not put into place, we would generate about, of net new revenue, 1.8 million. We would generate between 1.7 and 1.8 million of revenue from the lab fee that's already in place. So this is net new revenues. The students are already going to pay, if they're in the labs, that lab fee. And it's going to 21 next year and then 25 the following year. So we're just proposing eliminating it all, have one fee. This is the net increase. We'd be getting about 1.7, 1.8 without it. And then $4 million a year when it's fully implemented at the $40 per credit hour. It's been discussed with the students. As you might guess, there are 8,000 some odd graduates that come out of arts and science, so it hasn't probably been discussed with all the students, but it has been discussed with the student body, and they are in favor of it. In fact, they were in favor of applying the fee to all the courses, including the 1,000 courses, but that's not what we want to do.
Ken, what is a 2,000 level course?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I assume it's upperclassmen?
It's basically sophomore, junior, and senior courses. The 1,000 is primarily freshmen, but there are some 2,000 courses that are probably freshman level courses.
So the
too.
freshmen would end up benefiting to some degree because they would
Yes,
be paying lab.
they will.
Otherwise would be paying, of course, it'll be made up when they get to be sophomores.
That's
so
correct. That's correct.
Is the 4 million net of the 1.7 million you're losing, or in addition to?
When it gets to, when it gets to year 4, at $40 a student credit hour, that should be net over what we would have gotten if the lab fee continued.
So we would have gotten 1.4, 1.7.
1.7, 1.8, somewhere in there.
And if this is implemented, you'll get 5.8. 5.7.
No.
4.
No. Well, yes, at the end of the 4 years, that's right, because we would have gotten it anyhow.
Right.
Right, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
It's new money.
This is new money.
Yeah.
Right, this is new money, okay?
So it's a doubling of the fee in the first year, roughly. 1.7 appears to be what you'd be, I mean, you're getting new revenues net of 1.8, you're giving up net, which means originally it was about 1.7 to 1.8.
Well, recall that the lab fees only applies to a portion of the 2,000 level courses. This is all of the 2,000 level courses, whether it's lab or not lab. So one way of looking at it is it's a new fee on the non-lab 2,000 level courses. It's another way of looking at it. But rather, and it was confusing enough, we thought just doing away with the one fee and replacing it with this one was the better approach. How are we going to use the money? Well, you saw the problems that we had listed earlier. About $1.2 million in the first year will be spent on instructional STEM labs, doing some renovations, improvements, and the like. Faculty salaries, where we have, as I pointed out to you, a problem, will be a portion of it. And then we're going to use $200,000 of it in the first year for scholarships for students to study abroad in STEM-related disciplines. As you know, one other part of our strategic plan is that we want to have students more globally engaged. And this is one way to do it, and to relate it to a STEM-related discipline. And then in year 2, we'll do some tenure-track faculty hiring. That those figures will adjust, and we'll start doing some tenure-track faculty hiring. Impact? Well, that's our best guess as to the impact by using an average student in year 1. Non-ANS major, about $88, and that's some fraction of a course because we were trying to do a calculation. And then the upper class freshman in ANS, that's the cost. And then 4th year of this, the cost would be about $165 to a non-ANS major, and an upperclassman in ANS about $810. I wanted to put this other slide in there just to give you, again, some feel for how funding per student is related to the tuition rate. And if you look at this, again, these are the same states that we looked at earlier with engineering, the same institutions that we looked at earlier with engineering. And you see that, again, the higher the state support, in general, the lower the lower the tuition, and the lower the state support, the higher the tuition. And that's because cost of instruction is not the same in all institutions, but there is a cost of instruction. And the portion of it that gets covered by the state, the shortfall usually has to be made up on the tuition and fees side of the equation. So here's a summary of our new supplemental fees. The engineering excellence fees, the engineering excellence non-resident, and the arts and science fee, to give you an idea of how much we'll be generating, and again, reference to the strategic plan levers, which I'm not going to read to you at this hour. Any questions about the arts and science situation?
The proposal that's before us is just this year's funding, even though you're telling us you intend to come back next year. Was your 4-year plan developed before the governor made his announcement that he's seeking greater funding and additional monies for the stem cell?
Well,
for the STEM?
I would hope that you would know that we wouldn't have been working on this in the last 3 days. That this has been ongoing for a very long period of time in looking at this. So in answer to your question, it was not done after the governor's announcement on this.
And we're only voting on this year's?
I think what is before you is a 4-year plan, if I'm not mistaken, in the way it is in the materials, and that it is like some of the plans that have been done in the past to say this is a phased-in plan with a $5 increase next year, $5 increase the following year, and a $5 increase the final year.
Well, I'd like to vote on it separately.
Yeah, we would vote, we have to vote every year on the increase.
I mean, I'd like to vote on the A&S request separately than all the rest would be my preference. And then I'd have a motion modifying what you're proposing. I'm just, you're the chair of the committee, but that's my comment on this.
I have a question concerning scholarships for students abroad. I note that we are not increasing funding for hiring tenure-track faculty this year, but we're funding students studying abroad. I think that, to me, says our priorities aren't right. And I'm not saying yours, Ken, I'm saying...
No, I understand.
I'm saying the proposal, I question whether we shouldn't be hiring faculty and then later put in scholarships for people to study abroad.
I'm sure that message can get conveyed back, if that's the sense of the board.
I'm actually happier with the scholarships abroad than I am for merit increases coming out of student fees, which is loaded into yours but wasn't into S&T. I'm not happy with either, actually. I'm going to support it 1 year.
Okay, shall I go on? Let me run through the next series of fees and talk about them hopefully very briefly. A CAFNR supplemental fee increase, we're proposing a $2.50 increase over the current rate. The reason is there's an increased demand on experiential learning environments in CAFNR. And what I mean by that is, as you know, we run a florist shop, Tiger Gardens. We run a meat market. We run Buck's Ice Cream. We run the Gathering Place Bed and Breakfast. And we have the Culinary Cafe, all of which are training grounds for our students. And there's increased demand for those students in those programs. We have to keep up with the technology. We have to keep up with the improvements that are needed. So you see on there that we're going to be looking at facilities improvements and technology. Generates $127,000 to help us in that regard.
Okay.
Questions about that one?
Is that completely across the College of Agriculture, or is that targeted at those programs?
No, that would be across all agricultural, all hours generated in the College of Agriculture. And that'll be true, by the way, of all of the fees that you're going to see. It would be within a particular unit. If that unit teaches those credit hours, then the fee would be assessed against it. The next one is the College of Education supplemental increase. You heard earlier about some state-mandated standards. There are several of these state-mandated standards that we're going to have to comply with regard to experiential learning. What these new standards are requiring is much more contact and supervision in the student teaching arena. When students are placed out in various school districts to get their teaching experience, there are a lot of new standards that are requiring more and more contacts, more travel time, advising that would be necessary for them, and a lot of new reports that have to be supplied. The estimate by the College of Education is about $280,000 to implement this. We're asking for a fee that would cover half of that cost.
So who is requiring all this? The Missouri?
The Department of Secondary Education.
Yeah, that's right. This is all part of the idea up there that we should try to improve the professionalism of teachers that teach in the K through 12 system and hopefully improve student outcomes in elementary and secondary schools.
Yes.
As you go forward, would you please, as you address each one, state, just so everybody understands, including the committee, of course, which of these has already been approved by the board, and today you're asking for an increase?
Certainly.
Which have been pre-existing fees that are now increasing at the rate of inflation rounded to, and which, if any, of your remaining ones would be new fees?
None of these that you're hearing now are new fees. The CAFNR is not a new fee. Education is not a new fee. The two new fees were the engineering fee and the arts and science fees. Those were new. These are increases above CPI for already approved and existing fees.
And health management?
Yes, that one too.
And the Truman School?
Well, now the Truman School and the HMI fees were addressed at the last board meeting. I'm not discussing them here today.
Thank you. They're under D, just for everybody's information, the Truman School and the health management. And the ones that you are now going to address are those remaining under C.
Yes.
That are already pre-existing approved, but you're asking for an increase.
Increases that are above the 1.5 CPI.
Thank you.
And just to reiterate, at the last board meeting, you were given information and I think discussion about the two fees, the Truman School fee and the HMI fee. Both of those are graduate programs. They're not undergraduate programs. And those are new fees for those units.
Thank you.
Questions about the College of Education supplemental fee? The next fee is the health professions supplemental increase fee. It's a $16 increase over the current fee, so the new rate would be $92, a little over. It will generate money that will be used to hire, for faculty salaries, faculty hiring, some scholarships and facilities improvement. Most of you may know that health professions is primarily housed in the old Lewis and Clark dorms that were converted to teaching and office space many, many, many years ago. And as you might guess, there are facility problems there that need some correction for certain of the disciplines that are in that building. But the primary need is for faculty salaries and hiring, and that's what it's going to be used for. Journalism, $13 increase, proposed new rate of $74, primarily to help us keep our good journalism faculty. We're starting to get cherry-picked. We have the best journalism school in the world, and we want to keep it that way. And salaries are very important to helping us retain the very best faculty. So that's what this fee addresses. The last one for today is the nursing supplemental increase. All of our nursing students have an opportunity to go through the Clinical Simulation Center. The Clinical Simulation Center uses mannequins that mimic certain patient conditions and situations. And I learned for the first time recently that there are two kinds of those mannequins. There are high-fidelity mannequins, which unfortunately I visioned a record spinning and a needle dropping on it as high fidelity, which dated me dramatically, and low fidelity mannequins. The low fidelities cost about $60,000. The high fidelities about $150,000. They wear out after a while. They have to be replaced. This fee is specifically going to be used to generate funds to replace those mannequins and other equipment in the facility as it ages out. Summary of our above CPI request shown here. Total generation of about $1.2 million toward that $5 million that we talked about earlier. Any questions that anyone has about any of these?
The only one that is scaled up over a period of years is the ANS. Is that right?
Yes, the ANS new fee scaled over 4 years, yes, from 25 to 40.
Let me make the case for not letting the state legislature off the hook too easily. So we've come out of a 5-year recession. The governor has done the right thing with a better prognostication. If the legislature goes along with that, then we'll have better funds for our public universities at a reasonable cost for our in-state residents. And that's the goal. If we, every year, simply raise fees, it lets those legislators who don't particularly care about an affordable education in Missouri off the hook. And I don't think we ought to let them off the hook. And I don't think we ought to tell them over 4 years we're going to increase faculty salaries by raising fees. I think we ought to hold their feet to the fire. We've got a governor that had the courage to stand up and make a good proposal. So that's my case.
And I agree with you 100%. I want to reiterate something before I go to the last item. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
To follow John's comment, though, isn't the point that these are in some ways kind of a stopgap? I mean, we cannot take these fees and satisfy all the faculty needs that we have, or all the salary increase needs that we have.
Absolutely.
We can't do that. It's going to be up to the legislature at some point to step in and help fill that gap.
You know, we have determined that we have to help ourselves too, and we've done that. I want you to look at this slide again that you saw at the very beginning. We're doing internal reallocation to try and help ourselves accomplish what we want to accomplish. We're only asking, really, in new fees there for $5 million, which is half of that rate increase. $5 million out of 60 that we're going to be working with next year of new revenues and reallocations. It's a small portion, but it's an incredibly important portion.
Are we still going to be the lowest paid faculty in the AAU? Are we going to, this going to help us keep our AAU status?
We are determined to improve that situation. So,
But we'll still be the lowest even after all these fees?
well, it depends on what the others do. This is a moving target that we're shooting at one level, because we don't know how much they're going to raise their salaries next year. We're always looking at this. We're always looking a year or so behind, but we're catching up in some areas, and we have some departments on our campus where the average is above the AAU, but not many.
I thought we were lowest in the AAU.
Well, collectively, when you take the campus, when you take the campus as a whole, when you divide it into colleges and compare, each college collectively is below the AAU, but a college might have a department in it that is at the AAU average or above. And I'm aware of one.
Curator Bradley, we are either at the bottom or right near the bottom of the AAU. But the important part, I think, of the overall part here is not only to increase the salaries of existing faculty so we compare better within the AAU, but also to increase the size of the faculty so we shrink those student to faculty ratios. And that has two impacts. One, it improves instruction because we have more faculty per student, but it also gives us the opportunity to increase research capacity because our existing faculty aren't spending as much time teaching. They're spending more time to research, and that has a direct impact on our AAU standing.
But I thought our faculty teach 6 hours, right? They don't teach more than 6 hours. So it doesn't affect their research. If they only teach 6 hours, they're going to teach 6 hours either way, right?
It's a combination of size of class. So
Which takes more time.
Which
for them
takes
to-
more
Okay,
time.
I got you.
And we have faculty, by the way, on our campus who might have 15, 20, 25 section credit hours because they're teaching graduate students. And it might be a one-on-one kind of instruction or a one-on-3 or something like that. So they may very well be teaching more than the 12 hours. And in fact, many of our doctoral faculty who are engaged in generating PhDs do have more than those hours.
That ought to be explained to our legislators. That's the biggest complaint I hear. They're only teaching 6 hours. So if you can explain all that, Tim, you're a better man than I.
That's why I have Steve Knorr.
All right, so I want to move to the last item. And this is a request for I guess it's a exemption from the existing collected rule that requires us to charge all non-resident undergraduates. We've got all kinds of freedom with graduate programs. But at the undergraduate level, the existing collected rule requires us to charge out-of-state residents the out-of-state resident rate, which is next year scheduled to go to $774. We have seen a dramatic, that was implemented 2 or 3 years ago, and we've seen a dramatic drop in some of those, in many of those out-of-state registrations, because $774 is not market rate competitive with almost any market that you look at out there. So what we're asking for is the ability to charge the non-resident distance student $350. Now, I know in April or maybe June, there's going to be a much fuller discussion of this, maybe thinking of ranges and the like. We're not asking for ranges right now. We're asking for $350 as the charge that we can make to the non-resident distance student. We believe that is competitive based upon everything that we've looked at, the market comparisons that we've made.
Do we believe that that will increase revenue?
We do. The projections are that if we kept this, we'd have about a 60+% drop in registrations and revenues. If we go to the 350, that we could see a little over 60% increase in enrollments and revenue.
And
Yes.
as I understand it, this will be a separate action item.
Yes.
And that what you're presenting is a request for an exemption
Yes.
at this point from the collected rules, right?
Yes, because we're right now required to charge
That's right.
whatever the out-of-state fee is. Yeah.
That's collected rules and regulations 230.060A1, is that correct?
That is correct, I believe. Looking at Phil, I'm pretty sure that's correct. It's my recollection. And this just gives you an idea of what this will look like. We're still going to charge the non-resident student who is on campus the out-of-state rate. It's only the non-resident student who is distant that will pay the $350.
That's not a hybrid, that's a totally distant.
Totally
Not a
distant.
hybrid.
It is not a hybrid course. That's correct. We have lots of hybrid courses on campus where some of it may be done via Blackboard or online. Some of it's in the classroom. This doesn't affect those.
That really doesn't cost us anything extra either to have distant.
In fact, it gains us revenue.
Yeah, because the same faculty's teaching
Yes.
the same thing.
And
If
we
they
get,
add more students,
and it
it
helps
doesn't
us in
matter.
our market share for programs.
Okay.
Whoops. I think I'm done unless,
Any further questions for Provost Dean at this moment? All right, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ken. As a matter of, perhaps, if there's no objection, I would recommend that we consider taking up the final action item, which is 5, with respect to approving an exception to the collected rules with respect to the online fee. If no one objects, I think that would be very tidy to get that over with. Is that all right? Well, could I have a motion, please, to the effect of
We have some discussion. You want
Oh, I'm
discussion before or
sorry.
after the motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, either way.
Absolutely now. Is fine, or after the motion, either way.
I found this to be a pretty depressing experience, listening to all of this. You know, we've used fees for a long time, generally for some of the higher cost courses to kind of balance things out. But, you know, we've gotten to the point here where it's kind of in lieu of tuition, and then some of these things are so targeted for some particular purpose. I don't know what choices we have right now, but it doesn't seem like the way we ought to be trying to finance the university. And I know we're groping around trying to get money wherever we can, and that's probably what's, pushed this. But to, target where some of these fees are being used and having, separate fees for, buying inks and buying some other things. I mean, I don't know what to call it, but it doesn't seem like the way we ought to be doing it. And I don't know that we have any other choices now with this. When I asked to divide the question, I was hoping when we got into this part, we would find some other solutions. But after listening to it, I don't know that there are any other solutions beforehand other than spreading some things out over more years or limiting the portion to 1 year as John's proposing. But not good news.
I think that positive changes and buying new 3D printer ink and upgrading facilities and paying our faculty more are all very noble causes, and students are always going to be for that. But then, in the end, when the students have to foot all of that bill for all of the changes, that's when, in a couple years, once it really starts to hit us and we see our bill, then we look back and we say, oh, maybe we could have done without that. Because we're always going to think of new, luxuries and progress in terms of getting new equipment and things as good things, but at what cost, really?
Is the chair ready to entertain a motion on the last item, which is the...
Thank you, Curator Phillips. If it's still agreeable, let's deal with item 5, and then we'll come back to 4, which is the fees.
So I would move that we approve item 5, which is the out-of-state online reduction, or actually it has to be framed in terms of an exception to the rules, correct?
Yes, but the action item is in your materials and is already worded appropriately, I believe.
And I make that motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Cindy, roll call vote from the committee.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Okay, all committee votes in favor.
Karen, move the board accept this.
Second?
Second?
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Hendrickson?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
All right, let's return to action item 4, which is the list of supplemental fees that we have just exhaustively, not yet necessarily exhaustively discussed, but we have a number of supplemental fees. Curator Phillips is asked to speak.
I may have a better suggestion, actually. Instead of pulling it out, what I'd like to do is move for the acceptance of item 4 with the one change that the recommendation for ANS be for 1 year only, and that it be brought back to us next year in greater detail than the previous ones that we've adopted. We did a perfunctory approval of those this year without reviewing them. So I'd like for it to come back to us for consideration and be reproposed for future years if it's still the desire to do that for ANS. So with that exception, I would move approval for item 4.
I just want to bring up one point. I think Chancellor Morton wanted to clarify one aspect of something he told you before in his discussion.
Right at the end of our discussion about the School of Education, I think it was Curator Ponder who said, right, $2 per student.
I misspoke, it was credit out.
Right, it is. That's the correction. I think what it amounts to is about $35 per student is what's in the calculation per year.
And before we move on, Tom wants to clarify something with the graduate fees.
Ken had mentioned this point, but I did want to revisit this. In the action item, it's on page 4-3, section D 3 and 4, you'll see a health management informatics graduate course fee in MU Truman School. And just to clarify, we did present those at the November board meeting, and we talked about them at that time as being only applicable, though, to graduate students. So the real focus today was on undergraduate impact. There is detail on both of those graduate student fees on page 4-10. So we didn't specifically cover them in the presentation today, but I did go over those with the board at the November meeting, and the information is in your materials.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions for Tom? Let's return to Curator Phillips' motion, and I guess it's time to ask for a second, if there is one.
I've got a question. I'll second his motion, but I've got a question for Ken if he's, if we do that as far as saying, okay, we want to approve the fees with the exception of A&S only for 1 year, does that adversely affect the arts and sciences ability to hire tenured track faculty or get started? Because my understanding that next year the plan is to begin hiring tenured track faculty, and are we stopping the pipeline or stopping the plan?
Well, it might be viewed as going from a 4-inch pipe to a 2.5-inch pipe. So the answer is we can still do some of the things that we want to do, and we'll do some of the tenure track hiring. It just won't be as much. We won't do as much of the lab renovations as we had hoped for, and we may have to cut out the scholarship portion.
Clarifying question I would have is when you say 1 year, you mean $25 would be approved into the future, and taking it from 25 to 30 would come back next year?
Yes.
And then what you said, I didn't.
Right. That's the way I understood it. So, yeah, okay.
What, do you have an estimate as to the number of faculty positions? Because I think this is critical on faculty, is how many faculty positions will we not be able to make hires on if we do not go ahead and escalate the fee as proposed?
What we would be doing in any event every year is doing an evaluation of where our needs are. We have 28 or so departments in arts and science. And every year the dean evaluates where the hiring needs to be done based upon workloads, based upon productivity, and based upon student demand. So we would have to take those things into account and focus on the probably the highest student demand areas might be the first area that we'd look at, but certainly areas where we have an opportunity to increase productivity. I know that may sound like I'm not giving you a specific answer, but it's because this is a very dynamic situation that we operate in every year. And we want to make the best decisions. We don't want to commit to X number. The reason you got 20 on the engineering fee was that's trying to get us below 30 in the student-faculty ratio, somewhere in the upper 20s. And it's also to focus on some specific areas that they would be hiring in to alleviate the problems in mechanical and the like. So I can't give you an exact number, but it will be smaller than what it would have been with a phased-in fee.
Ken, could I ask a related question more to away from a generic discussion in terms of the concern with that's AAU directed? And as I understand it, is it correct that our goal there is to hire the best of the best when possible?
Absolutely.
And that means persons who will have the citations and all the other qualifications, and who will be able to attract high research dollars here and all that goes with that. Is there an effect on our ability to do that by refraining from going forward and for your planning purposes, for the campus's planning?
There will be an indirect effect upon that. I can't tell you exactly what the dollar effect would be, but remember, we're doing we have our total plan next year of $60 million that we're looking at. Part of that has in it hiring. And in our strategic plan, we're looking at doing cluster hires if we possibly can. Hiring kind of a star with supporting cognate faculty related to them. We've got 2 of those that we're working on right now. So it'll have some effect, but it's really hard to say exactly how much effect it would
But
have.
is it correct that it takes a lot more dollars to do that than it does to hire a person who comes in and very adequately teaches a class
Yes,
and does
costs a lot more.
normal research?
Yes. Startup costs are very high with those lateral transfers that come in. They demand it, they get it, and they're usually quite productive. And that's really where we're headed, is trying to do more of that. It takes longer to develop a person when they're hired in fresh in order to get them up to speed.
There is a motion by Curator Phillips, seconded by Curator Cups, to address only the first year, as I understand that, if I'm correctly representing it. And we need now to discuss that and resolve it.
I think if I'm understanding the difference between the first and the second year, it's $5. The first year is $25. The second year would be another $5, or what's that, a 20% increase. And I'm just saying, is the $5 going to, and $5 for the next 2 years beyond that? Why are we agreeing to that? Why would we agree to that now? So that's my point.
Discussion? Well, I guess by our questions, we have somewhat discussed as well. I guess we'll call for the committee vote on this motion.
May I clarify real quick before we do the roll call?
Please.
So the motion that's been made and seconded is to amend the new arts and science supplemental fee for 1 year only, and it would have to be brought back for future consideration. And is that it? Or are we also approving the other supplemental fees that were listed in C and D at the
Yes.
same time?
Yes, that's my
That was
motion.
perfect.
And it's my understanding the arts and science fee is continuing, it just won't automatically increase.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Madam Chair, would you like me to call the roll?
Yes, please, when you're ready.
Curator Covington?
No.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Okay. You have 3 votes in favor and 1 opposed.
Mr. Chair, the motion forwarded from the committee then is to approve as amended.
Second?
Second?
Please call the roll, Cindy.
Curator Bradley?
Yes.
Curator Covington?
Yes.
Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Downing?
Yes.
Curator Good?
Aye.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Ponder?
Yes.
Okay. All votes in favor at the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, well, is there a motion to adjourn the Finance Committee?
Please.
Actually, yeah, recess.
Recess.
Oh.
Recess.
Till Friday.
I want to adjourn.
We don't,
We don't need a motion.
we're in
to
recess
recess.
then.
Okay.
We declare ourselves in recess.
The board now will go into executive session down at the same room we were in.
Yeah.